Welcome to Whispers of History, where time ambles, the wind sighs through forgotten alleyways, and the past doesn't shout, it whispers. Tonight we sink into the meandering, butter-slow life of a 17th century Dutch spoon carver. Yes, a spoon carver. A man who whittled wood day in, day out, until his fingers smelled faintly of sap and regret. And here's your soft little warning: you probably won't make it through this day. Not because it's dramatic, heavens no, but because sleep will sneak in like an apologetic cat before we even finish breakfast. As if you enjoy these gentle historical rambles, tap the like button quietly, like you're closing a door with your hip so it doesn't creak. Subscribe if you'd like more evenings like this. And drop a comment with your local time and where in the world you're listening from. We love seeing your corners of the globe. Now take a slow breath. Pull the woolen blanket of your imagination over your shoulders. Let your muscles melt like... Now let's ease into tonight's journey. It's a pale, pearly morning in Haarlem in the Dutch Republic. The year is 1662. The sun is doing its best but only managing a watercolor sky. You hear a bell in the distance, soft, tinny, like a spoon tapping against the side of a bowl. Fitting. You're standing on a cobbled lane, damp from last night's drizzle, between houses that lean affectionately toward each other like gossiping neighbors. Their facades are clean but fussy, plastered with gables and trims like someone wanted to show off but still follow the rules. A black cat darts across the stones. Of course it does. It's 1662. Cats are either divine omens or pest control, depending on who you ask. Inside one of these houses, behind a green shutter cracked open just enough to eavesdrop on the world, lives. He carves spoons. Just spoons. You don't carve table legs or cabinets when that would be a betrayal. He carves spoons with the faith and seriousness of a monk copying scripture. His house is narrow but tall, like a stack of books left out in the rain. You climb the creaking stairs to the second floor, past a pair of shoes drying on the landing and a small linen towel that smells like yesterday's soup. His workshop is a square room with a tiny window and a view of the canal, not the good view, but the one where ducks argue like married couples. Inside, the smell is pine wood, beeswax, and damp wool. The table is and polished by time with a single worn stool. You sit. It's not comfortable, but neither is history. Doesn't greet you, he nods like the world's already had enough words today. He picks up a chunk of birch, leans into the light, and begins. With every curl of the knife, a ribbon of pale wood falls like a quiet sigh. He isn't in a rush. No one in this story is, and if you are, you've wandered into the wrong century. Today's fact: the Dutch Republic in the 17th century was one of the richest and most powerful places in Europe. Banking, art, trade, everything but spoons, really. While Rembrandt was painting drama and the East India Company was hoarding spices, was here shaping ladles. An obscure tidbit of the day: some households actually ranked their status by the number of carved spoons they owned. Yes, really, forks were still exotic and a bit suspicious, too stabby. But spoons, domestic royalty. Historians still debate whether small-time artisans lived comfortably or barely scraped by. Tax records are vague, and no one back then thought to write down. Still carving, still grumbling, still unmarried. As outside, the canal boatmen shout. Inside, a spoon begins to form, bowl shallow, handle thin and elegant. Stops, rubs his chin, and frowns at a knot in the grain like it's insulted his entire ancestry. You feel the weight of time here not as a burden but like a thick wool coat. It's warm, it slows you down, let it. The morning matures into a subdued gray, the kind of sky that never commits to rain, but insists on hovering nearby like a relative who just won't leave. Has taken his half-finished spoon and set it gently onto a linen cloth like a nurse settling in a newborn. He leans back, sips something from a rough clay mug, probably chicory. Coffee exists, but it's expensive. Real coffee is for merchants and scandalous poets. You watch the steam spiral like a lazy dancer. You don't speak. He wouldn't answer anyway. He's considering the next step. This part of the spoon, the hollowing, is delicate. If you press too hard, the bowl cracks. If you go too soft, it stays useless. A metaphor for 17th century life, really. You take in the room again. Against the wall is a rack of finished spoons. Some are utilitarian, others gently ornate. None of them match, doesn't do sets. Matching things are for people with servants. A small drawer near the window hides scraps of failed attempts, spoons that broke, warped, or simply didn't feel right. He calls it his graveyard. Yes, even back then, artists had trash piles they claimed were deeply symbolic. You ask yourself, how many spoons does one man need to carve in a lifetime? Though the answer apparently is as many as there is daylight. Or until your hands ache, or until dinner, whichever comes first. Now, today's major historical fact. In 1662, the Dutch East India Company was nearing its commercial peak, funding expeditions from Cape Town to Ceylon and Java. Its reach was vast: tea, textiles, tulips, even porcelain. But here in Harlem, your world is no bigger than a 6-inch piece of birch and a curved blade. Here's a curious tidbit. Dutch households often passed down wooden spoons as heirlooms. Some were carved with initials, birth symbols, or tiny jokes. One unearthed spoon had a crude engraving of a cat and a fish. Either it was whimsical or someone was very hungry and very passive-aggressive. Begins to carve again. You hear the steady rhythm of his blade, the soft skitter of shavings on the table. Every now and then he stops to look out the window, not to reflect but to judge the weather. Spooning is weather-dependent. High humidity swells the wood, too dry and it cracks, much like family dinners. He mutters something under his breath. You think it's about the grain, but it might just be a general sigh directed at existence. You notice his hands, broad, slightly twisted at the knuckles, stained with walnut oil and thyme. There's a callus shaped exactly like a knife handle on his palm. You imagine he's had it since he was 15. That's when his uncle gave him his first carving blade and told him, "This is your trade now." Not exactly a TED Talk, but it stuck. He finishes the bowl and inspects it under the light. Then, satisfied in that stoic Dutch sort of way, he sets it on the cloth next to the others. As outside, a church bell chimes 11. You've been here hours, but it feels like minutes, or maybe centuries. That's the charm of spoon carving. It rearranges time, or maybe it just erases it. One more ribbon of birch falls away, and you feel your own breath ease with it. You don't need to understand every detail. You're here to witness, to rest, and maybe, just maybe, let your mind begin to drift. Shall we go on? The bell from church has long stopped ringing, but its presence still echoes like a polite cough left in the corners of the room. You stretch your legs beneath the workbench. The stool wobbles slightly on a loose floorboard, an imperfection has no intention of fixing. It's been there since before the Treaty of, and it'll probably still be there when tulips are out of fashion again. He selects a new piece of wood, this time slightly darker, richer, with the faint scent of overripe fruit clinging to its skin. He holds it close to the light, tilts it, knocks on it like he's asking permission. It answers, apparently, because he reaches for the gouge with the curved handle and begins again. The sound it makes is oddly comforting, like peeling an apple in long, steady spirals over and over forever. You wonder if he ever gets bored. But then again, boredom is a luxury born in faster times. Here in Harlem, 1662, repetition isn't dull, it's dignified. The same rhythm, the same quiet work, day after day, it's what keeps the mind safe from wild imaginings and social revolutions. Probably. Speaks finally, just one word, knots. Now he's not complaining, it's more like an announcement, a way of letting you know this next spoon may resist him. The wood, not the process. The process never changes. And this is your historical fact for today. In the 1600s, the Dutch were masters of process. They industrialized before industry had a name: dye works, breweries, shipyards, mills. Everything had a rhythm, a protocol, a way things should be done. Even rebellion wore a well-pressed collar. An obscure cultural tidbit: Dutch spoon carvers known as sometimes carved messages along the handles. Not just names or dates, but sly personal sayings. One surviving spoon from Friesland reads, "Eat slow, love long." Another, more cryptic, simply says, "She never knew." Honestly, we still don't. Thus, hands work the knot carefully with small, circular movements. He leans in close enough that a splinter brushes his cheek. He doesn't flinch. You, however, instinctively blink for him. The light shifts slightly as the clouds rearrange above Harlem. For a moment, the window is a glowing rectangle of lemon-colored sky, the kind you only see in paintings now. Or, well, paintings then. Speaking of which, remember the neighbor's house you passed on your way in? The one with the ginger cat and the unreasonably symmetrical window boxes, that's the Van residence. And in about 10 years, their youngest son will be painted by a student of, not because he's interesting, just because he sat still and looked tragically bored. Some things never change. He wipes his blade on a cloth, pauses, then switches tools again. This one's smaller, good for fine shaping. It's the carving equivalent of threading a needle while half asleep. You respect it. Or you would if your eyes weren't starting to do that heavy blink thing again. He mutters once more, something about the grain again, or maybe the government. In the 1600s, they were often the same thing. You hear footsteps on the street below clogs. Loud, proud, unapologetically wooden clogs. Then a wheelbarrow rattles past, squeaking with the sound of ripe cheese and civic duty. Doesn't notice, he's deep in the spoon now. The gouge glides along the inside of the bowl. The wood gives reluctantly like a tired parent. When he stops this time, it's not for rest, it's for inspection. He holds the spoon up against the light, checks its silhouette, runs a thumb along the rim. His face doesn't change, but you get the impression it's good enough. Not perfect, just correct. You think maybe perfection was never the point. The air thickens around midday, not with heat, but with that particular quiet that descends on small cities when everyone has settled into their own rhythm. Even the ducks outside the canal window seem to have paused mid-bicker, floating in symmetrical stillness like feathered punctuation marks. Reaches for a pot near the window ledge. Inside it is linseed oil, cloudy, viscous, faintly nutty in scent. He dips a clean rag into the liquid and begins to gently oil the spoon he's just finished. It transforms instantly from pale, chalky wood to something warm, glowing, ambered like honey under candlelight. The way a spoon should look when it's ready to hold soup or secrets. He sets it on the drying rack, then sighs. Not from fatigue, but from satisfaction. A rare breed of happiness found only in those who committed themselves to a life of acceptable obscurity. Let's pause here just for a second and ask a question. Who buys the spoons? A few go to neighbors. Some are traded for cloth, flour, or favors. A surprising number are sold to traveling merchants who wrap them in linen and ship them south to France, where they're considered quaint and rustic. You imagine someone in saying, a Dutch spoon, how curious, as they stir their chicory with it and wonder why it smells like cheese. This brings us to today's historical moment. In the mid-17th century, the Dutch Golden Age was in full bloom. International trade was booming. Tulips were valuable enough to cause economic meltdowns, and every other house had a globe in it. Not because people traveled much, but because they liked the idea of knowing where the spices came from. Still down here, in this little room above the canal, the global economy is a rumor at best. Doesn't care for spices, except when they ruin soup. Here's your weird little cultural nugget for the evening. It was considered bad luck to stir your porridge counterclockwise. Why? No one knows. Possibly something about the devil, or maybe just an old aunt who once tripped and never let it go. The finishes oiling the spoon and sets the cloth aside. He doesn't clean up right away. Instead, he opens the tiny lead glass window just enough to let in the scent of the canal, mud, duck feathers, and the faint perfume of drying laundry. Somewhere, someone is cooking cabbage again. Harlem's finest cologne. He sits back on the stool, rubs his hands, and stretches. The movement is slow, deliberate, like his body only knows how to move in quarter time. From a drawer, he pulls out something unexpected, a spoon made of ivory. delicately carved with filigree up the handle. Not his work, it's too fine, too arrogant. He turns it over in his hand, frowns at it, sets it back. You don't ask, he doesn't explain. But the moment stays in the air like the aftertaste of a complicated tea. If another spoon blank is chosen, this one walnut darker than the others, harder to carve. He nods slightly to himself, the way a man does when he's ready to spend the next few hours battling nature with civility. As outside, the church bell chimes one. A soft sound, barely audible over the ducks starting their second argument of the day. Begins again, a new spoon, a new rhythm, the same story. And somewhere in the middle of all that quiet repetition, you begin to feel your thoughts stretching, slowing, unfurling like wood shavings across a worn workbench. Now you're not asleep, not yet, but close. It's in Harlem, which means the light begins to retreat slightly, shading everything in that subdued, golden-silver hue you only get in maritime cities. The kind of light that feels like a compliment. It doesn't shout, it just forgives. The canal outside's window reflects this mellow brightness like an old mirror, blurred at the edges, rippling just enough to remind you that time is still passing, even if nothing appears to be changing. Inside, the workshop feels cocooned. The world has narrowed to wood grain and dust motes. The soft of blade against walnut is steady, thoughtful, like someone writing a letter to a tree and expecting it to understand. This walnut is tricky, dense, unpredictable. It demands attention, narrows his eyes at a dark swirl in the wood. He taps it once with his thumbnail and mutters something that might be a prayer, or a curse, or both. It's hard to tell with Dutch spoon carvers. And this is your historical fact for today. The Dutch were pioneers of reclaiming land from the sea. They built dikes, canals, and polders, expanding their territory inch by stubborn inch. It's very on brand, isn't it? A country full of people who say, yes, the ocean is a problem. Let's politely ask it to move. And sometimes it actually does. Meanwhile, in this little room is reclaiming form from stubborn wood, which in its own way is just as impressive, and definitely more fragrant. Now here's today's obscure cultural tidbit. In the 17th century, it was common to hang a decorated wooden spoon above the cradle of a newborn. It was believed to bring health, luck, and quiet digestion. There are even recorded instances of spoons carved with tiny cradles on the handle. Yes, a spoon with a baby on it. Charming or mildly unsettling, historians disagree. You glance around the workshop again. It's small but not cluttered. Everything has a place. Tools are stored in leather loops on the wall. Shavings are swept to one corner, though never fully cleaned, likes to save them for kindling or stuffing shoes when the weather turns sharp. Remember that cloth bundle under the side table? Pulls it out now. Inside are 4 spoons he plans to deliver this week. Carefully wrapped in linen, they sit together like quiet little passengers. He checks each one, smooths a spot on the third, then rewraps it. He's not proud exactly, but there's a deep contentment in his silence. The kind that comes from knowing a spoon will outlive its maker by generations. It may stir broth in a farmhouse 100 miles away. It might end up in a drawer for 50 years, forgotten, then rediscovered by a curious grandchild who wonders why it smells faintly of smoke and lemon oil. As outside a cart passes, you hear the wooden wheels squeak and creak as they roll over uneven cobblestone. It's probably the fishmonger. Stiffens slightly, he knows that squeak. He doesn't look up. He doesn't like fish or the fishmonger. The details are unclear. The light dims just enough that he lights a beeswax candle. The flame flickers like a heartbeat, casting long, sleepy shadows across the walls. It smells faintly of honey and smoke. He works slower now. Evening work is cautious work. Eyes get tired. Hands don't listen as well. Mistakes wait in the corners. And yet he keeps going, shaping the inside of the spoon bowl, smoothing the handle with gentle strokes. You notice he hums almost imperceptibly. A low, tuneless murmur. Like a lullaby he doesn't know the words to anymore. In that moment, everything narrows even further. Just the spoon, the soft candlelight, the worn fingers, the hush. Even the ducks seem to sense it. They've gone oddly still, possibly asleep, or possibly plotting. The walnut yields slowly, graciously. The spoon is beginning to emerge, less an object, more a suggestion of one. Stops, holds it close, then gives a small, private nod. It's not finished, but it's behaving. You watch as he places it on the cloth next to the oil jar, then gently wipes his hands. Outside, the sky is beginning to soften into lavender and smoke. You feel yourself drifting, not away from the scene but deeper into it, like settling into a chair that remembers you. The time is doing strange things now. You're not entirely sure what day it is. That's fine, spoons don't need calendars. The candle has burned down a 1/4 inch. Outside, the street is quieter than before. The clogs have gone home. The carts are tethered. Harlem exhales in unison, a long, low breath of simmering cabbage, canal water, and damp wool. Inside the workshop stands. It's a rare event like a lunar eclipse or a friendly cat. He stretches again, this time more completely, arms above his head, fingers crackling faintly like branches in frost. He walks to the back corner of the room where a small kettle sits atop a rusted iron brazier. He lights it with a taper and begins to boil water. It's not tea, not yet, just hot water with maybe a leaf or two thrown in if the neighbors are feeling generous. Doesn't ask for things, but sometimes people give, out of habit or guilt or possibly confusion. Now today's historical fact is this. By the 1660s, the Dutch postal system was one of the most efficient in Europe. Letters could travel from Harlem to Delft in under 3 days, faster in some cases than carts could cross a single farm in England. Though of course, most people still just shouted out their windows or sent children running with scribbled notes. Which is why when a knock comes at the door downstairs, looks surprised. He almost drops the kettle. He doesn't move immediately, just stares toward the stairwell like it's betrayed him. Eventually, he pads down in stockinged feet. You hear a brief murmured exchange, a door creaks, something heavy is handed off, then footsteps up the stairs again. He returns carrying a small bundle wrapped in oiled paper, sets it on the bench beside you, unwraps it with slow fingers. Inside, a slab of cheese, a crust of dark bread, and miracle of miracles, a preserved apple. Someone has a soft spot for him or a guilty conscience. He grunts in appreciation and pours the now hot water into a mug, then tears the bread in half. He doesn't offer you any. You're not really here in that way. As he eats, he glances at the spoon he just started earlier, the walnut one. He chews slowly, as if the food and the thought are both difficult to digest. Then, finished, he wipes his hands and, of course, picks up the gouge again. The day is almost over, and still the work goes on. Well, here's today's odd cultural bit. In some Dutch towns, it was considered unlucky to begin carving after the church bells rang the evening angelus. You could finish what you'd started, but starting something new was said to invite restless spirits into your tools. Unsurprisingly, ignores this. He's not superstitious, just stubborn. Though the gouge moves in slow arcs, each stroke more deliberate than the last, you wonder how many spoons he's carved this year. 50, 100, 1,000. And then, without warning, sets the gouge down. He stands again, not to stretch, not to boil more water, but to walk across the room and open a small cabinet tucked beside the drying rack. Inside, 6 spoons, different than the rest. These aren't practical. They're strange, even experimental, one shaped like a swan's neck, another with a spiral handle, one with tiny inlaid beads of glass. They are, in a quiet way, magnificent. He takes one out, runs his thumb along its curve, and sets it gently on the windowsill. Now you suspect this is the closest he gets to hope. He returns to the workbench but does not sit. He stands over the walnut spoon and studies it one last time. Then he places a cloth over it. The day's carving is done. As outside, the light is nearly gone. A final streak of lavender fades behind the rooftops. The canal is still. The ducks are gone, probably off to attend their evening conspiracy. The candle flickers lower. You feel your shoulders soften, your breath slows. You think very faintly that maybe tomorrow there will be another spoon. Or maybe not. But either ways we'll be here, whittling, waiting, working the grains one curl at a time. And so will we. The evening in Harlem doesn't fall so much as it folds, like a woolen blanket tucking itself gently over the rooftops. The street outside has emptied to a whisper. Light flickers behind window panes, casting blurry shadows of daily rituals. The slicing of bread, the washing of hands, the slow settling of families into night. In Inside's workshop, the silence is not absence. It's presence. It fills the room like smoke from a doused hearth, thick, comforting, familiar. He doesn't light another candle. The one that remains burns low, its wax pooling, leaning toward the inevitable. He doesn't need more light, not for this part of the day. The carving is finished. The rest is ritual. And takes a small brush from the windowsill, its bristles splayed from use, the wood of its handle smoothed by years of touch. With careful strokes, he brushes the shavings on the workbench into a neat pile. Each curl of wood is lifted, turned, considered before being swept aside. They're not trash, they're echoes. Now, today's historical fact. In the 17th century Dutch Republic, the average artisan worked 12 to 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. Sundays were reserved for church and for not pretending you weren't sore. There were no vacations, only feast days, and those depended entirely on whether your town was in a festive mood or just deeply Catholic. He doesn't observe feast days. He doesn't even pause for Sunday, though he does carve slightly slower, out of respect for the Lord's presumed interest in spoon speed. Now, today's obscure cultural tidbit. It was believed by some that the shape of your eating spoon could influence your personality. Narrow, bold spoons were said to make one reserved and good with secrets. Broad spoons were associated with generous appetites and larger opinions. No word on what happens if your spoon is crooked, probably something scandalous. He sits again not at the bench but on a low stool near the back wall. Here he keeps a journal. It's not ornate, just a sheaf of pages tied with string wrapped in brown oilskin. You didn't think he was the journaling type, neither did he at first, but habits form like tide pools, quietly, and then they stay. He writes only a few lines each night. No flowery metaphors, no profound insights, just notes. From dense but clean, 3 spoons finished. Cracked bowl firewood, fog rolled in by noon. You look at the earlier pages, they go back years. Spoons, wood sources noted, weather always recorded. Strangely, you begin to notice how often the entries mention ducks. They seem to loom large in his cosmology. He finishes writing, ties the journal shut, and places it back beneath the stool. You hear the church bell strike again, soft and distant. 8 chimes. Each one a gentle reminder that the day has almost completely let go of itself. He stands and walks to the window. He opens it fully now, inviting in the night air. It smells of cold stone, baked bread, and rain waiting to happen. The moon is somewhere above the cloud cover, shy but loyal. He leans against the windowsill, arms folded, watching nothing in particular. Occasionally, he nods to someone across the street, a baker, probably, or the weaver's apprentice who always drops his keys. Life in Harlem is a rotation of familiar inconveniences and well-known names. Then softly, unexpectedly hums. A lullaby, you recognize it not by its tune but by the way it curves around the silence, like steam curling from a mug left on a windowsill too long. A song for no one, or perhaps for the spoons. And here, where we end the day, not with drama but with stillness. The kind of stillness that makes your eyes heavier. The kind that fills your lungs with quiet. You stay just a moment longer, not to learn, not to listen, just to be. And then slowly, gently, you let go of the window and let your thoughts follow the curve of that last spoon into dreams shaped like wood curls and candlelight. The next morning arrives unhurried, not with trumpets or rooster cries, but with the soft breath of gray light slipping past the shutters. You're already awake somehow, though not fully. You exist somewhere between consciousness and coziness, swaddled in woolen stillness. The kind of morning where socks go on slowly, if at all, and no one should speak until the first cup of something warm has been consumed in reverent silence. Is in the workshop stirs, not dramatically, there's no grand entrance. Just the sound of slippers on wood, a soft throat clearing, and the clink of tools being rearranged on instinct. He doesn't need to look. His fingers know. He lights the stove. The fire catches with the hiss of damp kindling. A minute later, the kettle is back in place and the quiet bubbling begins again. As outside, Harlem is stretching. Window shutters open like blinking eyes. A boy pushes a cart down the street, wheels clattering. Somewhere, a milkmaid sings a few bars of a hymn before being interrupted by a goat, probably intentional. Here's today's historical fact. In 1662, Harlem was home to one of the first public lending libraries in Europe. A small collection of books, available for a modest fee, including topics such as botany, moral virtue, and recipes you'd never try twice. Knowledge, even back then, wanted to be free, or at least rented. Doesn't visit the library. He can read, sure, but books smell too much like questions. He prefers things with answers, like wood grain, or whether a spoon balances properly when turned upside down. Today's cultural tidbit. In certain parts of the Netherlands, it was believed that your household spoons should never outnumber your close friends. If they did, it meant you were either too proud or about to be haunted. No one could explain how, but one woman reportedly blamed her haunted spoons for her runaway cat. Back in the workshop is at work again. This morning's wood is apple, a little softer, with a warm scent that seems to curl into your lungs and settle there like a memory. He turns it in his hand as if greeting an old friend. He sharpens his blade not quickly but methodically. Sharpening is a kind of prayer. Each pass across the whetstone is deliberate, quiet, with a slight hiss that feels more like breath than sound. And now the carving begins. He doesn't rush, he never does. The first few cuts are like footsteps through fresh snow, careful, aware, reverent. You sit nearby, not speaking, not moving, just absorbing. As the blade curls through the wood, peeling ribbons that fall like sleepy snowflakes onto the bench. The scent deepens, applewood, mixed with the faint sharpness of metal and the warm, lived-in aroma of candle wax clinging to the air from last night. Pauses, he inspects a small imperfection, an off-colored spot near the handle. He considers it. Then, instead of carving it out, he changes direction, adjusts the design, works around it. Because that's what you do with flaws in the 1600s. You don't erase them. You live beside them, sometimes you even highlight them. As outside, a faint drizzle begins, soft, rhythmic, more suggestion than storm. The kind of rain that stays for hours without ever becoming urgent. A rain that pairs well with soup or carving. Inside, the room feels warmer now despite the season. The fire hums in the stove. The wood glows under hands. The spoon takes form not quickly but inevitably. And you settle further into the story, into the rhythm, into the idea that maybe the slowest lives are the ones that last the longest, if only in memory. You glance at the walnut spoon from yesterday. It's dry now, ready for oiling, ready for purpose. But doesn't reach for it yet. He lets it sit as if it needs to learn something first. So the morning continues, unbothered by urgency, untainted by schedules. Just the sound of a knife on wood, the breath of the stove, the tapping of drizzle on the window pane. And the quiet conviction of a man who believes that one good spoon, truly good, might be enough to make a day worthwhile. Rain, when it arrives in Harlem, doesn't so much fall as it settles in, like an elderly relative who brings their knitting and says, "I won't stay long," and then does. The sky is a single sheet of pewter now, stretched low over the rooftops, pressing softly on the city like a woolen hat pulled down too far. In the workshop, the light is blue-gray and gentle, filtered through the tiny leaded panes now beaded with droplets. Each tap of rain on the glass feels deliberate, rhythmic, intimate. He doesn't mind rain. He doesn't like it exactly, but it's predictable. So long as he oils the wood properly and leaves the shutters cracked just enough to breathe, it won't cause trouble. Moisture is a known thing, unlike cities, politics, or extended family. He's halfway through shaping the applewood spoon now. The bowl has taken form, shallow, wide, the kind of spoon meant for ladling porridge that's been simmering since before dawn. He's begun working on the handle, a gentle taper with a soft ridge running down the middle. Elegant but unshowy, like most things in this room. Here's your historical fact. The Dutch Golden Age didn't just bloom from tulips and trade, it was fueled in part by relentless urban planning. Harlem, like many Dutch cities, was meticulously laid out. Streets aligned with canals, property boundaries drawn with mathematical obsession. You could measure a man's civic virtue by how cleanly his gutter drained. In contrast, does not believe in neat lines. His spoons curve, dip, shift according to the wood's desire. He claims it's about respecting the grain, but really he just doesn't care for squares. Now, today's obscure cultural detail. Some 17th century Dutch homes had special spoon racks built directly into their kitchen walls. These weren't mere storage. They were displays, spoons lined up like trophies. Guests were expected to admire them, and if they were lucky, choose one to eat with. Imagine picking your dinner utensil like a wine glass. Decadent. Back in the workshop, stops to oil yesterday's walnut spoon. He dips his rag into the linseed, rubs it in slow spirals, and watches the transformation. It glows warm, rich, confident. The spoon is no longer a piece of wood, it's a vessel, it's a tool. It's a whisper of the tree it once was and the meals it has yet to meet. He sets it gently on the drying rack and places the cloth back in its jar with monk-like precision. Then oddly he steps away. You blink. Has left the bench. He disappears into the back room, which you now realize you've never really looked at before. It's not hidden, just ignored, the way we ignore closets in dreams. He returns a moment later carrying a small wooden box. He sets it on the bench but doesn't open it right away. He sits, He breathes. He looks at the box like it owes him something. Finally, he lifts the lid. And inside, spoons. Not new ones, not for sale. These are old, worn, familiar. Each one bears nicks and scratches, the kind of wear you only get from hundreds of mornings and uncounted meals. They're not decorative, they're not even particularly beautiful, but handles them with reverence. These, you realize, are his spoons, the ones he kept, the ones with stories. He takes out a small, dark spoon with a chipped handle. He holds it like a photograph, staring at it without quite seeing. He turns it over, smiles barely, then returns it to the box. You ask nothing, he says nothing, but the silence speaks volumes. Of another historical moment for context, wooden spoons were often included in a bride's dowry. Entire families of utensils would be passed down, engraved with dates, initials, and sometimes gentle warnings. One surviving example reads, "Mind thy mouth before it opens." Owns no such heirlooms. His spoons begin and end with him. The rain thickens, the candle wavers. Somewhere in the canal, a duck quacks once, resigned to its damp fate. He returns the box to the back room, not with ceremony, just care. Then, almost automatically, he sits again and lifts the half-finished applewood spoon. The work resumes. Slow, careful, true. And you drift even deeper into the rhythm of it. The times by this point in the day becomes a suggestion. Afternoon has passed and evening waits like a dog at the door, but inside the workshop it could be any hour, or none at all. The stove gives off a low, amber glow. The candle burns slightly sideways from a hidden draft. The rain continues in its soft percussion on the shutters, sometimes speeding up, sometimes slowing down like it's trying to match its pace. He's rounding the end of the applewood handle now, carving a small flourish at the tip. Not quite decorative, just intentional, a gesture really, like the period at the end of a well-written sentence. He brushes the spoon clean and lays it beside the walnut one, nodding once to himself. You wonder if he ever talks to them. He doesn't seem the type, but still, you've been here long enough to suspect that each spoon knows more than it lets on. Today's historical fact. Harlem, though quieter than Amsterdam, was once a hotbed of artistic experimentation. It housed some of the finest painters of the Dutch Golden Age, Hals among them. He painted with a kind of unvarnished immediacy, capturing people mid-breath, mid-thought, mid-life. You imagine's portrait in that style, eyes focused, fingers smudged with oil, a curl of wood balanced on his sleeve. He'd hate it too flashy. Today's cultural curiosity. In some rural Dutch towns, there was a tradition of whittling courtship. Young men would carve spoons for their intended. Hopping the girl would accept the utensil as a token of serious affection. The quality of the carving allegedly reflected the depth of the carver's love, which means that somewhere out there, a girl received a spoon with two mismatched handles and said, "Absolutely not." I carves for many reasons, but love isn't one of them. He takes a moment now, no carving, no oiling, just stillness. He drinks from a small earthen mug. The tea, if you can call it that, is probably more hot water than herb, but he sips it slowly as if each swallow matters. You look around the workshop again. You notice things now that you didn't earlier. The uneven fade of the wood on the windowsill. The tiny gouge marks in the floor beneath the bench, evidence of dropped blades and impatient apprentices long since gone. The faint scent of cloves that lingers in the fabric of his coat, likely from the spice merchant who trades him scrap wood in exchange for household tools. The world outside continues. A boy runs down the alley laughing. A door slams. A rooster crows for no discernible reason. But inside, all is calm. Picks up another blank. This time it's hornbeam, pale, fine-grained, almost shy. A cooperative wood, but delicate, easily bruised. He sharpens the blade again. The whetstone sings its quiet song. He touches the wood gently, starts his first cut. It's different from the others. You sense it immediately. This one is slower, more careful. He's not just shaping, he's listening. You line an end too. The strokes are light, almost hesitant. The grain resists, not like a challenge, but like a conversation, back and forth, blade and bark, memory and motion. He doesn't speak, but something about the set of his shoulders tells you this spoon matters. It's for someone or something, a promise, a memory, a moment about to be preserved in shape and form. He smooths the edges with his thumb, inspects the curve with his eye, not with perfectionism but with tenderness. Then, for the first time all day, looks directly at you. Not startled, not annoyed. Just aware. As if to say, yes, I know you've been here. And then, just like that, he returns to the spoon. And you're not sure if you breathed during that whole exchange. You feel as though you're wrapped not in time, but in fabric, thick woolen memory, something familiar and warm and possibly passed down through generations. The hornbeam spoon continues to emerge. And you begin to understand, maybe for the first time, that this isn't about spoons. Not really. It's about staying, about doing one thing well for a very long time. About quiet devotion to the smallest tasks. And how those tasks, if repeated with care, become sacred. The sky darkens again. Rain softens. The candle bends. And somewhere not far from here, a kitchen waits for a spoon that hasn't been finished yet. But will be. Soon. By now, the sky has completed its slow transition from silver to velvet. No fanfare, no sudden fade to black. Just a gradual thickening of shadow, the quiet withdrawing of light, until darkness becomes the default and not the exception. Inside the workshop, the candle has burned down past the halfway mark. Its flame shivers each time the wind shifts through the cracked window. The hums a low, ember-rich tune. It smells like apple cores and rain-warmed stone. Now working under the fragile glow of flame and habit is halfway through shaping the hornbeam spoon's bowl. His fingers are slower, Not because of fatigue, though it's there, coiled in his shoulders, but because hornbeam is deceptive. It feels cooperative at first. Smooth, polished, almost eager. But try to move too quickly and it rebels, chipping at the rim or pulling fibers in the wrong direction. Now he knows this. He's carved hornbeam before, many times. And still, each piece behaves a little differently, like twins with opposite opinions on soup. You notice now how quiet the street has become. No carts, no clogs, no laughter from the neighboring house. Just the occasional gust brushing against the shutters and the low, conspiratorial gossip of ducks far down the canal. The city isn't asleep yet, but it's deep in its pajamas. Now here's your historical fact. By the 1660s, Harlem had more breweries than churches, and more painters than bakers. It was a city drunk on its own aesthetics. But even then, beneath the wigs and wealth, the heartbeat was slow, measured in the creak of mills, the whisper of brushes, and the soft clink of wooden tools being passed from father to son. Not that has a son, or a wife, or anyone really aside from the fishmonger who speaks only in frowns and passive-aggressive nods, which in Dutch terms is practically affection. Your obscure cultural tidbit for tonight. In certain parts of the Netherlands, it was once common for elderly men to be buried with their favorite eating spoon. Not out of superstition, though some believed it might be needed on the other side, but simply because it had been theirs for so long, it was considered a part of them. Like a wedding ring, or an old pair of boots. Sharpens his gouge again, not because it's dull, but because this part of the spoon demands precision. He leans in close, so close his breath fogs the wood. He scrapes, peels, shapes. The room smells like fire, linseed, wet wool, and something else, faint but unmistakable. Memory. The kind you don't realize you're having until much later, when some object or sound tugs you backward and you're suddenly inside it again. He adjusts his posture, rolls his shoulders, places the hornbeam spoon beside the drying rack, not yet finished but finished enough for now. Tomorrow it will be sanded, oiled, and placed with the others. For now it rests. You follow his gaze to the far corner of the room where the shadows have thickened. A long-forgotten broom leans drunkenly against the wall. A pair of boots, mended twice, soaked once, and never quite recovered, sits with their toes slightly touching, like shy children waiting for someone to speak first. He stands again, stretches, not with complaint but with quiet ritual. He pours the last of the hot water into his mug, now steeped with something mildly medicinal. Chamomile maybe, or whatever herb grows near the river and promises sleep without charging too much for it. He drinks it slowly. You think perhaps that this is his real dinner. The bread and cheese were obligation. The tea is intention. And then, so softly you almost miss it, he opens a drawer beneath the bench and pulls out a square of folded cloths. Inside it, a half-finished spoon, unlike the others. It's carved from ash, light in color but heavy in feel. Its handle is longer, narrower, with small, careful notches along the underside. He runs his thumb over it once, as if trying to remember why it's there. Though this spoon hasn't been touched in weeks. maybe months. Well, he doesn't start carving. He just holds it, weighing it in his hand like a question he's not quite ready to ask. And you hold your breath against. Because you know somehow without being told that this spoon is different. Maybe it's meant for someone. Maybe it was. But tonight doesn't continue it. He wraps it again gently and places it back in the drawer. Then finally he begins to clean up. The one tool at a time. The one motion after another. Not hurried, not distracted. Just concluding. The way all things should. The night has fully arrived. Not in a grand gesture, no thunder, no crashing tide of darkness, but in the way dusk always does, quietly, completely, and just a little bit early. Is in the workshop, the candle has been snuffed. Only the stove remains lit, casting long, lazy shadows across the floorboards. The walls seem to lean inward now, not oppressively, but protectively, like an old friend wrapping its arms around you. Sits near the stove, one hand wrapped around the mug, now empty. His eyes are not closed, but they're not entirely open either. Somewhere between focus and dream. The kind of look a man wears when he's half remembering something too small to matter and too important to forget. Here's your historical fact. Candles during this time were taxed differently depending on their purpose. A work candle used for labor was taxed less than one used for leisure. This led to strange habits. Men would leave their benches just before sundown but keep working near their stoves or windows pretending they'd stopped. The Dutch were practical, also sneaky. However, isn't pretending now. The tools are away, the spoons are resting, the day is over, fully and without protest. Tonight's curious custom. In 17th century Harlem, when a neighbor died, it was common for the nearby residents to cover their windows with black cloth, not to ward off spirits but to keep out gossip. The dead deserved silence, and so did their families. These days, we do the opposite, live streaming grief and calling it community. He shifts slightly, reaches for a cloth bundle near the stove. Not spoons this time, but scraps of wood. Small, curved, strange-shaped mistakes, experiments, unfinished thoughts. He sorts through them slowly, placing some in a basket near the hearth, setting others aside. One he studies longer than the rest, just a sliver really. A bit of that cracked right down the middle years ago, he still keeps it. Maybe because he doesn't know why. You sit beside him quietly. There's no dialogue, not in this world, not yet, only proximity, presence. The stove pops once, just once, and then sighs. Outside, a cat yowls, or maybe it's a baby. Hard to tell in Harlem after dark. Inside, closes his eyes fully now, just for a moment. A breath, a blink, he doesn't sleep sitting up but he rests. And as he does, your own thoughts slow. The rhythm of your breath evens out. Your shoulders melt downward. Your chest expands softly like it finally remembered how. And you think, maybe this is why we tell stories about quiet lives. Not because they're dramatic, but because they remind us we're allowed to be still. To do one thing at a time. To make something with our hands. To be known only by our work and loved anyways. And in the quietest corner of a forgotten city, in the top room of a narrow house that smells like old wood and warm tea, a man makes spoons. Well, that's it. Well, that's the story. And somehow it's enough. Morning again. If yesterday's rain felt like a long exhale, then today's silence is the inhale that holds. Harlem wakes beneath a layer of cloud so still it seems painted there. The canals do not move. Even the ducks appear to tiptoe. In the narrow top-floor workshop is already awake. He's been awake, actually, long enough to light the stove, pour hot water, and sit with both hands cupped around a ceramic mug as if it's trying to teach him something. Oh, he hasn't spoken, but he's listened. You notice how the air feels different today, still soft, still sleepy, but heavier somehow. As if the world turned a corner overnight and forgot to announce it. He sets down his mug and walks to the far side of the room, where a tall cabinet leans slightly left, like it's been meaning to stand up straight for the last 2 decades but never quite committed. He opens the door. And inside, wood blanks. Neatly stacked, categorized not by species but by mood. The upper shelves are filled with cherry, ash, and lively grains with a bit of bounce. The middle shelves house the workhorse woods, beech, maple, hornbeam, reliable, honest, slightly boring, and the bottom shelf tucked away, shadowed, humble, holds the dark stuff. Walnut, elm, blackthorn, pieces with knots and character, stories in the grain. He kneels carefully with the complaint of a man who's earned every creak, and selects a small piece of elm. It's weathered, a bit twisted. You can already tell it'll fight him, which is likely why he chooses it. Here's today's historical fact. Elm trees were once among the most prized for woodworking, not because they were easy, but because they didn't split under pressure. In fact, elm was so tough it was used for water pipes before iron replaced it. A pipe made of tree, that's the sort of confidence 17th century craftsmen walked around with. And you thought your sourdough starter made you rustic. Back at the bench examines the piece. He doesn't cut right away. First, he talks to it, not out loud but with his eyes, his fingers, a tap here, a press there. He's not measuring, he's learning. Your odd cultural tidbit. There was once a guild in the Low Countries whose members specialized only in spoons used for serving eggs. Yes, egg spoons. Slightly flatter, slightly wider, and always polished to a gloss. They were considered an upper-middle-class status symbol, like a garden that grows only herbs you never cook with. Isn't making an egg spoon, he's not even sure what this spoon will be, but he starts carving. The blade enters the elm like a slow breath. It resists, of course it does, but adjusts his pressure, his angle, his pace. You see now that he's not cutting into the wood, he's coaxing with it, letting it speak, letting it interrupt him. The first shavings fall in tight, unruly curls. They're darker than the others, denser, more fragrant. They smell like rain-soaked bark, dried apples, and something sharp like old iron or dried blood. Doesn't flinch. He works slowly, steadily, the gouge singing its dry wooden hum. And you begin to realize something else. This is the spoon from the dream. No, not your dream, his. You don't know how you know, but you do. Maybe it's the shape, or the way he handles it, or the silence that follows every cut as if the room itself is holding its breaths. He pauses, sharpens the gouge, wipes his brow, continues. Hours pass without your noticing. The sky remains gray. The fire hisses. The spoon begins to take form longer than usual. Slender, slightly curved at the neck, like something meant for a very particular hand or memory. And suddenly he stops. Not at a natural break, just stops. He sets the gouge down and walks to the window. He opens it wide. The wind rushes in cold, damp, honest. It ruffles the shavings, shifts the candlelight, and makes the spoon on the bench tremble slightly. Breathes. Then turns, steps back to the bench. And starts again. There's a kind of silence that arrives only after many hours of sound. It's not empty, it's full, saturated, echoing with what just happened. That's the silence now. The elm spoon sits on the workbench, half-shaped. Its form visible but incomplete, like a sentence missing its last word. Stares at it not with frustration, with recognition. Something has surfaced, a memory, an old shape, a name maybe. He doesn't speak it. Instead, he walks to a small, narrow drawer beneath the drying rack, pulls it open. Inside, papers, letters, folded pages yellowed and brittle with age. He flips through them until he finds a thin, leather-bound book smaller than the others. He opens it. The handwriting isn't his. The ink is faded but legible. You recognize the words, though you've never seen them before. They're notes. Recipes, mostly measurements for tinctures, a few herbal diagrams, marginalia written in a careful, looping hand. Someone tried very hard to make this book understandable. Someone with steady fingers and a need for order. He turns to a page near the middle. There's a sketch of a spoon. Long, slender, slightly curved, almost identical to the one on the bench. He stares at it a long time, then closes the book. He doesn't put it away. He sets it beside the elm blank. Today's historical note. During the 17th century, Dutch women often kept household journals, not diaries of feelings, but practical records. Recipes, remedies, crop cycles, child illnesses, trade habits. These books were passed down, updated, annotated. They were practical, yes, but they were also sacred, a history written in teaspoons and fever salves. Most have been lost, torn, or burned. A few remain in museums. Others are held close out of sight. This spoon is carving matches won from such a book. And now you realize this isn't just a spoon. It's a remembering, a resurrection, a map maybe back to something unfinished. Your cultural detail for tonight. Children were once taught to identify each household spoon by feel blindfolded. It was a game, yes, but also a way of teaching attentiveness. A well-made spoon has a unique weight, a balance, a certain signature in the palm. Spoons, in that sense, were personal. Picks up the gouge again, resumes. Though the cuts are slower now, more deliberate. Each motion is a reply to the hand that once sketched the design. You don't know who she was. But he does. The room, for the first time since you arrived, feels full. Not crowded, just full. Like something unseen has taken a seat at the bench and is quietly watching. Though the elm doesn't resist as much now. It yields not completely but enough. He carves the bowl with a hollowing gouge, a curved blade that removes wood in long, satisfying arcs. You hear each stroke land, peel, lift. The sound is hypnotic, like waves on a wooden shore. He sands the handle, wipes it clean, presses his thumb along the underside notch, adjusts it slightly, then stops again. The spoon is finished, or nearly. He holds it in his hand, not to inspect it, but to feel it. He places it in his palm, rolls it once, tests the balance. Then places it beside the book, and closes his eyes. Not in fatigue, in gratitude. And outside, the sky has darkened further, not storm dark, just dim, honest. Though the ducks pass again, you can hear them, a single flap, a low, gossiping quack, then silence. Inside sets the spoon on a fresh cloth and oils it. Though the wood deepens in color, blooming under the linseed like a blush. He places the cloth and spoon into a small wooden box. Shuts the lid. And then for the first time you see him smile. Not big, but full. Night has settled fully now, a thick velvet drape pulled low over Harlem's narrow streets. The city hums softly, its breath slow and measured, like a giant settling into bed. The shutters of neighboring houses are closed, the lamps inside their rooms burn low or not at all. Somewhere nearby, a dog snores beneath a stoop, punctuating the silence with gentle rhythm. Inside's workshop, the world feels both larger and smaller than before. Larger because the shadows seem to lengthen beyond the walls, curling into the corners like slow-moving smoke. Smaller because the warmth of the fire, the soft glow of the candle stub, and the scent of linseed oil and wet wood concentrate all things essential into this single room. He sits back on his stool, rubbing his hands together. His fingers carry the scent of wood shavings, earth, and a faint trace of something floral. Perhaps the tea he sipped earlier, or the remnants of a dried flower pressed between the pages of a book long closed. Now, today's historical fact. In the 17th century Dutch Republic, artisanal workshops often functioned as social hubs for the community. Craftsmen exchanged not just goods, but news, gossip, and sometimes even political ideas. Yet despite this, many preferred solitude while working, believing focus could be disturbed by too much talk, a sentiment surely shared. The cultural tidbit for the evening. It was once customary in some Dutch villages for young apprentices to carve their first spoon under the watchful eye of their master, usually during a candlelit vigil held at the workshop. The completed spoon wasn't just a tool. It was a symbol of readiness, patience, and entry into a centuries-old tradition. Whether ever had such a ceremony is unclear. Historical records remain silent on his personal rights. Reaches toward the drying rack, his eyes soft but intent. He carefully lifts the walnut spoon from its perch, now fully dried and ready. His fingers trace its curves with the kind of reverence one might reserve for an old friend or a fragile heirloom. He turns the spoon over in his hands, inspecting the sheen left by the linseed oil. You realize that each spoon, each curve, each notch carries a weight beyond utility. It's a conversation with the past, with the trees, with the hands that shaped it, and the mouths it will serve. A soft cough comes from the corner of the room. You glance and notice a small wooden box partially tucked beneath the bench. Retrieves it, carefully undoing the simple latch. Inside lie spoons of varying shapes and woods, each with its own story etched in grain and wear. He pulls out the ash spoon from earlier, still wrapped in the cloth, its notched handle slightly rough to the touch. He holds it close, as if willing it to tell its story aloud. As outside, the rain has stopped, leaving behind a fresh scent of earth and stone. A lone cat prowls quietly, its footsteps muffled by moss and cobblestone. Places the ash spoon beside the walnut one. Then slowly he sits at his journal again. Not to write, but to read. His eyes scan the pages in soft concentration, absorbing notes and weather reports, his handwriting steady and deliberate. You watch him as he pauses, looks up toward the small window. The moon peeks shyly from behind a thin veil of clouds, casting silver light that softens the room. A moment passes, a breath suspended in time. Khan closes the journal and lets his hand rest on the wood of the table. The silence thickens. It's a silence filled with all the unspoken things, hopes, memories, losses. And perhaps the slow weaving of a life measured not in moments, but in the quiet shaping of something small and lasting. Morning arrives gently, the kind of dawn that slips past the city without announcing itself. No crowing roosters, no urgent calls, just a gradual washing of the sky from slate gray to soft blue. As in the workshop, the air is cool and still. Is already at the bench, the faint glow of dawn creeping through the leaded glass windows. The scent of damp wood mingles with the faint aroma of dried herbs hanging nearby, forgotten for the night but waiting to be called upon. He selects a new piece from the upper shelf, lighter and more pliable than the elm. Its grain is fine, almost silky, with faint flecks that catch the light. You notice how holds it delicately, almost as if it might shatter beneath his touch. Here's today's historical fact. was favored in Dutch woodworking for its smooth finish and subtle strength. It was often chosen for spoons destined for the wealthier classes, partly because of its ability to be carved finely without splintering, and partly due to its gentle scent that seemed to linger on the tongue. The cultural nugget. In some parts of the Netherlands, there was a belief that spoons carved from brought harmony to a household. It was said they could smooth over quarrels, just as the wood itself could be sanded smooth to perfection. No evidence historians could find supports this claim, but the idea endured in local folk tales. He sharpens his blade meticulously. The whetstone sings a quiet, rhythmic song as he draws the edge along it. His movements are practiced, a dance repeated thousands of times. The blade catches the morning light gleaming faintly. He begins carving slowly, the blade slicing through with a soft whisper. The curls of wood fall away, delicate and fragrant, dusting the bench like petals scattered by an unseen breeze. You observe the pace of his hands, deliberate and unhurried. He carves not to hurry but to listen, to the grain, to the shape emerging beneath his touch, to the weight of the piece shifting in his palm. He stops periodically, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. His gaze flickers to the window where a few birds have begun their morning song, a tentative chorus greeting the new day. He works through the morning hours, marking the subtle changes in light and shadow as the sun climbs higher. The room fills with the quiet energy of creation. The sound of blade on wood, the faint creak of the stool, the soft rustle of shavings. When the bowl of the spoon takes its first clear shape, he smiles faintly, a rare expression that seems to acknowledge a small victory. He sets the spoon down carefully, almost reverently. Then he reaches for his journal. Today he writes not just notes but a short entry. The sweet and soft, spoon will be light in hand, rain clear, birds sing at dawn. You note the simplicity, the quiet poetry in these words. No grand declarations, no longing or complaint, just observation, presence. As outside, the city hums awake, but inside, time stretches like the long shadows on the floor, patient, generous, slow. Returns to the spoon. He picks up sandpaper, a coarse sheet made from powdered glass, and begins smoothing the edges. His fingers move gently, coaxing the wood to softness. The scent deepens, mingling with the warming tea still resting nearby. He pauses to take a sip, then wipes his mouth with a cloth, eyes half closed in contentment. You feel yourself sinking deeper into this rhythm, this quiet world where the smallest things, wood, water, light, hold entire stories. The spoon begins to glow under his touch, its surface polished to a warm sheen. And as the morning sun spills fully into the room, you realize that this is not just the making of spoons. It's the making of time itself, measured in cuts and curves, in breath and patience, is in the slow unfolding of a life lived deliberately. And you, wrapped in the soft light of a simple workshop in 17th century Harlem, are part of it too. The afternoon light slants low through the narrow workshop window, casting long, lazy stripes across the worn floorboards. The air inside is thick with the scent of wood shavings, linseed oil, and the faintest trace of dried herbs, lingering like the memory of a conversation just ended. Outside, the city hums softly, the faint clatter of a cart, the distant bark of a dog, and the muted voices of neighbors drifting in like ghosts. He sits quietly at his bench, the spoon resting gently in his palm. His hands, strong but marked by years of careful labor, move slowly as he lifts a fine grit sandpaper and begins to smooth the curves he carved earlier that morning. Each pass is deliberate, patient, as if he's coaxing the wood to reveal a secret hidden just beneath its surface. Well, here's your historical fact for this chapter. The 17th century Dutch economy was booming, driven by trade, art, and innovation. Yet amid this prosperity, artisans were caught in a delicate balance, maintaining traditional crafts while adapting to increasing demand and shifting tastes. It was a time of both preservation and subtle transformation, much like the careful sanding of a spoon to retain its original shape while preparing it for new use. Now, today's obscure cultural tidbit. In some Dutch towns, it was customary for spoon carvers to carve small hidden symbols into their spoons, an acorn here, a tiny star there, known only to the owner and the maker. These secret marks served as signatures and sometimes as good luck charms, whispered in the language of wood and grain. His fingers pause on the handle of the spoon, his thumb brushing over a small, barely perceptible notch he has carved near the base. It's not for decoration nor for function, but something more personal. A quiet signature, a mark of identity that speaks softly to anyone who might hold this spoon in the future. He sets the spoon aside carefully and reaches for a small bowl of water, dipping a cloth into it before wiping the surface of the wood, making it shine faintly under the afternoon sun. The transformation is subtle yet profound. The spoon no longer looks like a mere piece of carved wood, but a vessel waiting to be filled with stories, meals, and moments. The room seems to hold its breath as sets the spoon to dry on the rack, then stands and stretches, the muscles of his back creaking in protest like the old floorboards beneath his feet. He walks to the window and opens it, letting in a breath of fresh air and the soft murmur of the city. As outside, the cobblestone streets glisten with the remnants of rain, and the canals reflect the pale sky, still steady and calm. A woman passes by carrying a basket of herbs, her footsteps muffled by wooden clogs. She pauses for a moment, looking up at the workshop with a curious glance before moving on. He watches her go, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Then he turns back inside, his gaze falling on the assortment of spoons drying on the rack, each one holding a promise of utility, care, and history. You too feel the weight of this moment, the quiet interplay between creation and stillness, between the hand that carves and the life that will eventually hold the spoon. Evening drapes over Harlem like a soft shawl, the sky painted with hues of deep indigo and faint gold. The city lights begin to twinkle, reflected in the calm waters of the canals that snake through the streets like silver ribbons. The air carries the scent of wood smoke and damp earth, mingling with the distant sound of laughter and music from a nearby tavern. Inside the workshop sits once more at his bench, the spoon now dry and glowing softly in the flickering candlelight. His hands move with practiced ease as he reaches for a small pot of linseed oil, dipping a rag into the thick amber liquid before carefully applying it to the spoon's surface. The oil soaks in slowly, deepening the wood's color and bringing out the intricate patterns of its grain. A historical fact for this evening: the use of linseed oil in woodworking was a well-guarded secret among Dutch artisans, prized for its ability to protect wood from moisture while enhancing its natural beauty. It was a slow process, requiring patience and repetition, much like the lives of the craftsmen themselves. As a curious cultural note, in some parts of the Netherlands, it was customary to present a newly carved spoon as a gift during important family celebrations, such as weddings or baptisms. The spoon symbolized nourishment, care, and continuity, a small but meaningful token connecting generations through shared meals and memories. He pauses his work to gaze out the window, watching as the city settles into the quiet rhythms of night. The moon casts a gentle glow, illuminating the workshop's cluttered shelves and the scattered tools of his trade. His eyes reflect a quiet contentment, tempered by a trace of longing that lingers beneath the surface. He resumes oiling the spoon, each stroke slow and deliberate, as if infusing the wood with more than just protection. A kind of blessing, perhaps, or a wish for the unseen hands that will one day use this humble tool. As the candle burns low, sets the spoon aside and leans back, letting his hands rest in his lap. The room is filled with the soft crackle of the fire and the occasional whisper of wind through the shutters. Outside, the city breathes a steady, gentle rhythm, a lullaby of stone and water. You feel yourself drawn into this quiet world, where time slows and the smallest acts carry profound meaning. The spoon, once just a block of wood, has become a vessel of stories, patience, and care, an echo of a life lived with quiet devotion. And as you sit there, enveloped in the warm glow of the workshop, you understand that sometimes the most extraordinary moments are found in the simplest of things. The first light of dawn slips hesitantly through the narrow window panes, casting a muted glow on the scattered tools and worn wood surfaces of the workshop. The air is cool, tinged with the faint scent of damp stone and early morning dew. Outside, the city stirs slowly. Shutters creak open, horses clatter over cobblestones, and the faint murmur of merchants arranging their stalls reaches even this quiet room. Is already at his bench, the soft light outlining his silhouette. His hands, steady and sure, reach for a small block of resting atop a pile of shavings. The wood's fine grain catches the light, promising a smooth finish and a spoon both strong and delicate. You notice how the room seems almost alive in these moments, each shadow and beam of light interacting with the objects within, creating a tapestry of stillness and movement. The scent of wood mingles with the faint trace of the tea left cooling beside the stove, a reminder of yesterday's quiet moments. On today's historical fact, was favored in spoon carving for its balance of hardness and workability. Artisans prized it for its rich reddish hue and the way it held detail under fine carving. In the 1600s, cherry trees were also cultivated in Dutch orchards not only for their fruit but for the wood, which was considered valuable, and even at times traded as currency. And an obscure cultural detail. In certain Dutch villages, it was common practice to craft spoons with a small hole at the end of the handle. This hole wasn't merely decorative. It allowed the spoon to be hung from a peg or cord, making it easier to keep track of, especially in communal kitchens. Historians debate whether this tradition influenced early forms of spoon displays in later centuries. Lifts the block and studies it thoughtfully. His eyes trace the grain, searching for hidden weaknesses or unexpected beauty. Unlike the elm and he worked with earlier, feels warmer to the touch, almost alive in its subtle pulse. He sets the wood carefully on the bench and picks up his gouge. The blade catches the morning light, a slender promise of precision and patience. With slow, deliberate strokes, he begins to carve, listening to the whisper of the blade as it parts the grain. The curls of wood peel away in soft spirals, falling like autumn leaves onto the bench. Each shaving carries its own scent, sweet, earthy, and faintly like cherry blossoms in bloom. You hear the quiet rhythm, the pulse of the blade, the scrape of the wood, the gentle scrape of sandpaper when he pauses to refine an edge. It's a symphony of subtle sounds as intricate as any orchestra. He works steadily, shaping the bowl of the spoon with care. The curves emerge slowly, like a secret revealed over time. His fingers are deft, moving with the memory of years, each movement a note in a melody only he fully understands. As occasionally, he pauses to wipe sweat from his brow or adjust the small magnifying lens perched on his nose, a tool meant to help him see the tiniest imperfections. You can almost feel the concentration folding the room in on itself, drawing all focus inward to the humble act of creation. A knock on the door pulls briefly from his work. A neighbor's voice drifts in, asking if he has any small spoons for sale, something for the children perhaps, or for serving the evening stew. Replies with a nod and a promise to prepare some by week's end. You watch him return to his carving, the interruption barely breaking the flow. The steady hum of work resumes, underscoring the patience and quiet diligence of this life. You're drawn into this unhurried world, where every cut, every breath, every small moment carries the weight of tradition and quiet hope. The afternoon light pours warmly into the workshop, bathing every surface in a golden glow. Dust motes drift lazily in the sunbeams, catching the light like tiny stars suspended in time. The air is filled with the mingled scents of sawdust, oil, and faint traces of herbs drying on a nearby shelf. Has moved on to a new project. A small spoon carved from beechwood, known for its smooth grain and subtle resilience. The block sits on the bench, awaiting transformation beneath the steady hands of its maker. Now, today's historical fact. Beechwood was often used in Dutch kitchens not just for utensils, but also for cutting boards and other implements that required durability and a fine finish. Its abundance in local forests made it a practical choice, though it was sometimes considered less prestigious than exotic woods brought in through trade. As a curious cultural note, among Dutch artisans, there was a whispered belief that spoons carved from beechwood were particularly suited for sweet dishes, porridge, honey, and fruit compotes. Whether this was true or mere superstition remains debated, but the tradition added a layer of meaning to what might otherwise seem ordinary. Sets the block of beechwood firmly on the bench and picks up his gouge, its edge freshly sharpened. He begins to work the wood, the blade gliding through the grain with practiced ease. Shavings curl and fall away, each a delicate whisper of transformation. His movements are slow, deliberate, and full of quiet reverence. You notice how he pauses frequently, his eyes narrowing as he examines each curve and contour, ensuring that the spoon will fit comfortably in the hand that uses it. The room is filled with the gentle sound of his work, the scrape of blade on wood, the soft patter of shavings falling to the floor, the occasional creak of the stool as he shifts his weight. He hums softly under his breath, a tune passed down from his father or perhaps his grandfather. The melody is simple, repetitive, soothing, like the work itself. As he carves, his mind wanders briefly to the market. Soon, these spoons will be bundled with others and sold to families who might never know the hands that shaped them. There is a strange comfort in this anonymity, a connection between maker and user bridged not by words but by the silent utility of the spoon. You see the subtle smile that crosses his face as he finishes the spoon's bowl, then begins to shape the handle with careful precision. The curves are soft, the edges smooth, designed to fit naturally in a grasp. He sands the spoon meticulously, the surface becoming satin under his fingers. Then he oils it lightly, watching as the wood deepens in color, revealing hidden veins and patterns. Sets the finished spoon on the drying rack alongside others, each a testament to quiet craft and steady hands. As outside, the sun begins to dip low, casting long shadows across the city. The sounds of the day soften, replaced by the gentle hum of evening, distant voices, footsteps on stone, the occasional clink of glass. He cleans his tools carefully, laying each in its proper place. The ritual of tidying is as important as the work itself, a way of honoring the day's labor and preparing for the next. You feel yourself wrapped in the gentle rhythm of this space, the slow unfolding of time, the patient shaping of wood and life. And you understand deeply that in the making of spoons there is a kind of meditation, a slow, deliberate practice of presence and care. The first soft light of dawn spills quietly into the workshop, filtering through the leaded glass panes like whispered secrets. Outside, the city is still shrouded in mist, the canals muted mirrors of the sky and the cobblestones slick with overnight dew. The faint clatter of early risers stirring can just barely be heard, perhaps a baker already setting out loaves or a fisherman preparing his nets. But inside's room, Time seems held in gentle suspension, as if the world has conspired to grant one more moment of quiet before the day's rhythm begins. Is at his bench, already awake and alert, though his movements remain slow, deliberate. On the work surface lies a piece of small, dense, and pale with a subtle sheen. It feels cold and smooth in his hands, promising a finish unlike the softer woods he has worked with before. The grain is tight, almost imperceptible, but present, like the faintest heartbeat beneath the skin. He studies the block carefully, turning it in his hands, tracing the edges as if memorizing every line. There's a reverence in the way he approaches the wood, a silent conversation that has grown over years of shared hours and quiet companionship. Here's your historical fact. Was prized in the 17th century for fine carving and inlay work. Its density and resistance to splitting made it ideal for detailed pieces, like musical instruments, chess pieces, and yes, spoons. Though rarer and more expensive than common woods, spoons were a subtle mark of refinement, often reserved for special occasions or the wealthier households. A curious cultural tidbit to accompany it. Some Dutch spoon carvers believed that the hardness of symbolized strength of character, and would sometimes gift such spoons to apprentices as a rite of passage, proof that they had mastered not only the craft but the patience and resilience it demanded. Whether ever received such a gift himself is lost to time, but the tradition lingers faintly in his cautious touch. He sets the block on the bench and picks up his smallest gouge, a slender blade worn smooth by years of use. He begins with gentle strokes, teasing the spoon's form from the dense wood, each pass deliberate and measured. The shavings fall away thin and crisp like slivers of moonlight. The workshop fills with the subtle scent of fresh-cut wood mingled with the lingering aroma of candle wax and dried herbs. Dust motes drift slowly in the beams of light, turning the air itself into a tangible presence. You feel the quiet patience of the moment, how every cut is a small surrender, every curve a new discovery. The dense resists stubbornly at times but adapts, shifting his angle and pressure, coaxing the grain to yield. He pauses frequently, wiping sweat from his brow and adjusting the magnifying lens perched on his nose. His eyes narrow with concentration, tracing every line and shadow, seeking perfection in imperfection. As outside, the city awakens fully. The bells of a distant church toll softly, marking the hour. Footsteps echo faintly along the streets, mingling with the calls of merchants and the laughter of children. The everyday symphony of life continues beyond the walls of the workshop, a reminder that the world spins steadily onward even in these quiet moments. Pauses his carving and sets the gouge down. He reaches for a small bowl of water and dips a cloth in it, then wipes the surface of the spoon, revealing the rich, creamy color of the beneath. The transformation is subtle but profound, a shift from raw block to potential. You notice the flicker of something in his eyes, a blend of satisfaction, reverence, and perhaps a touch of melancholy. It is a look that speaks to the weight of craftsmanship, the burden and blessing of making something meant to endure. He sets the spoon aside carefully and pulls open a drawer beneath the bench. Inside lie several other spoons, each different in wood and form, each carrying the silent stories of past days. Selects a small, worn journal and opens it, fingers tracing the faded ink of old notes and sketches. The pages are filled with drawings of spoons, measurements, and fleeting thoughts, reminders of ideas explored, mistakes made, and lessons learned. A soft sigh escapes him as he closes the journal and returns to his work. The block awaits, patient and silent, ready to become more than just wood. You watch as he picks up the gouge once more, the blade catching the morning light, promising new beginnings and slow, steady progress. The afternoon sun pours through the window in generous streams, warming the workshop and casting dancing shadows on the worn floorboards. The air is thick with the rich scent of freshly carved wood, mingling with the faint hint of beeswax from the polishing cloth nearby. Outside, the city bustles softly, vendors calling, children playing, and the distant clatter of horseshoes on cobblestones providing a lively backdrop to the sanctuary of this quiet room. He sits at his bench, his eyes narrowed with quiet focus as he turns the nearly finished spoon in his hands. The dense wood glows warmly under the soft light, its smooth curves inviting touch and attention. Every line, every contour has been honed with patience and care, each detail a testament to the slow, deliberate art of craftsmanship. Here's a historical fact to anchor this moment. Beeswax polishing was a common practice among Dutch artisans, prized not only for the subtle sheen it imparted, but also for its protective qualities. It was believed that beeswax could help preserve the wood against moisture and wear, extending the life of utensils and other wooden goods, a small but meaningful investment in longevity. A curious cultural note. In some Dutch households, spoons polished with beeswax were considered more than just tools. They were symbols of hospitality and care, passed from hand to hand during meals, embodying the warmth and connection of shared sustenance. Whether thought about such symbolism as he worked is unknown, but the act itself carried quiet significance. Reaches for a small pot of beeswax and a soft cloth, beginning to apply the wax in gentle circles, watching as the wood's surface deepens in color and texture. The rhythm of his movements is meditative, a slow dance between hand and material. The soft crackle of the fire and the faint murmur of the city outside create a cocoon of calm. Time seems to stretch and fold within these walls, measured not by hours, but by the gentle unfolding of care and attention. He pauses, setting the spoon aside to dry, and leans back, rubbing his hands together as if to warm them against the lingering chill. His gaze drifts to the window, where the fading light paints the sky in shades of pink and purple. There's a quietness in this moment that speaks to something deeper than work, a connection to something timeless and enduring. The spoon, once just a block of wood, has become a vessel of care, patience, and quiet joy. You feel yourself drawn into this stillness, wrapped in the soft glow of candlelight and the gentle pulse of slow, deliberate creation. And you realize, perhaps, that the beauty of this life lies not in grand gestures or loud declarations, but in the tender, patient shaping of something small and lasting. The dawn arrives softly, almost reluctantly, like a secret whispered between the fog and the awakening city. Harlem's streets lie silent, cloaked in mist that curls and twists like smoke rising from unseen fires. The narrow canals shimmer faintly under a sky that hesitates between night and day, neither fully committed to darkness nor light. Inside's workshop, the air is cool and still, infused with the faint musk of dried herbs and the lingering warmth of last night's fire. A solitary candle flickers weakly, its flame wavering as if reluctant to break the silence. The worn floorboards creak gently beneath his feet as he moves toward his bench, a ritual dance he has performed countless mornings, each step heavy with familiarity and quiet purpose. He reaches for a piece of pale and delicate, its fine grain promising a gentle response to the blade. The wood feels soft beneath his fingers, almost fragile, like a sigh caught between breath and silence. Holds the block carefully, turning it slowly to catch the light, searching for hidden flaws or secret strengths. The wood whispers possibilities, waiting patiently for the first touch of the gouge. Here's your historical fact. Beyond its common use for spoons, was also prized for musical instruments and fine furniture during the Dutch Golden Age. Its ability to take a smooth finish and slight fragrance made it a favorite among artisans who sought to create objects that pleased both the eye and the senses. It's an obscure cultural tidbit. Some Dutch craftsmen believed that carried a faint, almost imperceptible scent that could calm nerves and clear the mind. Whether this was true or simply a comforting myth is lost in the folds of time, but the idea lingered in workshops and homes alike. As begins to carve, the blade gliding softly through the grain, each cut a careful conversation with the wood. Shavings curl away like delicate ribbons, falling silently onto the bench. The workshop fills with the gentle sounds of creation, the scrape of blade, the rustle of falling curls, the faint scratch of sandpaper as pauses to refine a curve. You notice how his hands move with a measured grace, as if each motion has been choreographed by years of practice and quiet observation. His eyes narrow in concentration, tracing the evolving form of the spoon as it emerges from the raw block. He stops briefly, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, then gazes out the window where the city slowly stirs to life. The bells of a distant church toll softly, echoing through the mist, marking the passage of time in gentle, steady beats. Returns to his workbench and picks up a small carving knife, shifting to finer details. The handle begins to take shape, its curves soft and inviting, designed to fit comfortably in a hand yet to hold it. The quiet hum of the workshop envelops you, a cocoon of slow time and patient labor. Outside, the world rushes forward, but here, the minutes unfold like petals, gentle, deliberate, and unhurried. As the morning deepens, pauses to rest, setting the spoon carefully on the rack to dry. He pours himself a cup of tea, the steam rising in soft swirls, mingling with the scents of wood and oil. He sits back, eyes half closed, breathing in the stillness of the moment. The day has only just begun, but already it carries the weight of countless such mornings. Quiet, steady, filled with small acts of creation. You feel yourself slowing with him, wrapped in the soft embrace of this timeless space, where even the smallest things, like a spoon carved from, hold the promise of meaning and care. The afternoon sun pours generously through the workshop's windows, turning dust motes into tiny stars suspended in the golden light. The warmth fills the room, softening the edges of worn tools and rough-hewn benches, bathing everything in a honeyed glow that speaks of comfort and home. He sits at his bench, the spoon now drying quietly among its companions. His hands are steady as he reaches for a small block of rich and warm beneath his fingertips. The grain is fine and tight, promising a smooth finish and a touch of elegance. Here's your historical fact. Was often reserved for spoons destined for wealthier households during the Dutch Golden Age, prized not only for its durability but also for its beautiful reddish hue. It was sometimes gifted as a luxury item, a small token of refinement in a world increasingly enamored with trade and exotic goods. It's an intriguing cultural detail. In some Dutch traditions, spoons made from were said to bring a bit of sweetness to the table, not in flavor, but in the atmosphere. The belief was that their warm color could soften harsh words and foster goodwill during meals, though historians still debate the origins and sincerity of this custom. He sets the block carefully on his bench and picks up his gouge, its blade sharpened to a fine edge. He begins to work, the blade moving with quiet authority through the shavings fall away in soft spirals, each one a delicate echo of transformation. The room fills with the scent of fresh wood and linseed oil, mingling with the fatting aroma of beeswax from earlier in the day. Outside, the city's murmur fades into a gentle hush, as if the world itself is holding its breath in reverence for this slow, deliberate act. Carves steadily, the spoon's shape emerging with graceful curves and subtle balance. His hands move with practiced precision, each motion a quiet meditation on form and function. He pauses frequently, examining the spoon as it grows, searching for imperfections or unexpected beauty. You notice how the light shifts through the window, casting dancing shadows that play across the grain, revealing hidden veins and patterns. The wood seems almost alive under his touch, responding to his care with a quiet glow. He finishes the bowl and begins shaping the handle, softening edges and refining curves. The spoon begins to take on a personality, simple yet elegant, humble yet proud. He pauses to wipe his brow and glance outside, where the sun dips low, casting long shadows across the city. The day winds down slowly, the air growing cooler and the sounds softer. He picks up sandpaper and begins to smooth the spoon's surface, the coarse grit gradually giving way to finer textures. His movements are gentle, coaxing the wood to a satin finish. Finally, he oils the spoon with linseed oil, watching as the color deepens and the grain becomes more vivid. The transformation is subtle but profound. a quiet celebration of care and patience. He sets the finished spoon on the drying rack alongside others, each one a silent testament to the slow art of making and the quiet beauty of everyday objects. As evening falls, the workshop fills with shadows and soft light, a sanctuary from the rushing world outside. Cleans his tools carefully, each movement deliberate and reverent. You sit with him in the fading light, wrapped in the warm glow of wood and flame, feeling the steady pulse of time and tradition. And you understand, in this stillness, that sometimes the most profound moments are found not in grandeur, but in the patient shaping of the small and ordinary. Night descends slowly over Harlem, like a curtain being drawn by unseen hands. The canals reflect the flickering lanterns lining the narrow streets, and the scent of chimney smoke begins to settle in the air like a soft shawl. A cat prowls along a rooftop in the fading light. Footsteps echo faintly from a side street and disappear into stillness. Inside's workshop, the world is much the same as it ever was. The familiar glow of candlelight flickers across his worn tools. The spoons rest quietly on their drying rack, some gleaming with fresh oil, others halfway through their transformation from block to object. Time here is not marked by minutes or bells, but by shape and softness, by what has been made and what waits to be. Tonight's wood is sycamore, a soft, pale variety with a fine grain and an unassuming dignity. Lifts it carefully from a shelf near the hearth. His hands recognize the weight immediately, the density, the subtle moisture still tucked inside the fibers. He tilts it in the light, running a thumb along one smooth side. Here's your historical fact. Sycamore was a less glamorous but often preferred wood among carvers in the 17th century. It didn't split easily, accepted polish well, and was widely available, ideal for those who valued function over show. In fact, many of the spoons used in modest Dutch homes during the Golden Age were made from sycamore, their pale glow catching candlelight with understated beauty. And here's an obscure little cultural whisper. In certain northern Dutch provinces, sycamore spoons were often given to new mothers, tucked quietly beside a bowl of broth or porridge. The wood was said to carry calming energy, gentle, nurturing, sturdy. Historians, of course, continue to raise eyebrows at such sentimental folklore, but that doesn't stop the stories from persisting. He smiles slightly as he begins his first shallow cuts. The gouge glides smoothly, lifting fine curls of pale wood that fall like cream-colored ribbons onto the table. He works quietly, slowly, adjusting the angle of his blade with the rhythm of breath and muscle memory. The room is quiet except for the sounds of the knife and the occasional sigh of the wind against the shutters. The fire in the hearth crackles quietly, sending flickers of warmth into the chill evening air. His face is relaxed, his brow furrowed in concentration but softened by something gentler, peace perhaps. Or maybe the strange joy of being in complete harmony with his task. As he shapes the bowl, his eyes narrow to track the curve, checking for symmetry, for grace. The wood responds well, pliant and soft but not weak. It yields to his blade without complaint, and in return he honors it with care. He pauses to sip from a mug of herbal tea left cooling nearby. The steam curls around his fingers as he holds the cup, the scent of chamomile and nettle rising to meet him. He stares into the middle distance for a moment, lost not in thought but in stillness. Then, with a soft exhale, he returns to work. He begins forming the handle, opting for a gentle arc rather than a straight shaft, something more comfortable in the hand. A shape that might cradle itself into someone's palm one day without demanding attention. His fingers are dusted with fine wood powder now, his nails edged in soft splinters. He doesn't mind. The discomfort is familiar, even welcome. It's a reminder that the work is real, tactile living. By now, the room is darker, the candle burning lower, its flame smaller but steadier. The spoon's shape is nearly complete. Only the fine details remain, the smoothing, the sanding, the small imperfections to coax away like tiny secrets held too long. And as works, you feel yourself slowing with him. The hush of the room, the care in his hands, the texture of every carved edge, everything conspires to quiet the world. Outside, the city sleeps. Inside, a man shapes wood into memory. Morning arrives with a pale kind of confidence. The light doesn't burst in, it seeps slowly like water soaking into linen. Harlem stretches itself awake. A crow caws in the distance, a dog barks once, and somewhere a baker's door creaks open, followed by the first warm scent of bread wafting into the chilled morning air. Inside the workshop is already awake. He moves slowly, not out of fatigue but from ritual. There's a kind of reverence to the way he lights the small oil lamp on his bench and checks each spoon on the rack. Some he turns over gently to inspect the drying oil, others he lifts to the window to catch the light across the grain. Now today, he's chosen to work with a darker wood, black walnut, dense, rich, and more demanding. The block rests on his bench like a secret, waiting to be discovered but only willing to yield to the patient. Here's your historical note. Black walnut was not native to the Netherlands but arrived through trade routes, especially from North America. Dutch merchants, ever eager to acquire fine materials, prized it for its dramatic coloring and its resilience. For a time, it became fashionable among wealthy households to own a foreign spoon, though ironically few could actually name the tree it came from. And here's your curious tidbit. Because of its rarity, some Dutch craftsmen carved walnut spoons intended only for display, never for use. They were hung on kitchen walls or tucked into glass cabinets, as you've come to know would likely frown at this. A spoon that doesn't stir, scoop, or serve, that's just a wooden painting. He sets the block of walnut down and sharpens his knife with slow, even strokes on the whetstone. The sound of blade against stone is rhythmic and grounding, like a metronome ticking in a quiet room. The first cut is harder than with the sycamore. The walnut resists dense and grainy with a heart that doesn't surrender easily. Adjusts. He leans closer, changes his grip, and takes a shallower angle. The gouge begins to lift small, dark curls from the wood. Though this spoon will take longer, and he's fine with that. As outside, the light brightens. The canal outside his window catches a reflection of a passing boat. The merchant on board sings softly, voice thin but cheerful, doesn't sing, but he listens, always listening. The bowl of the walnut spoon emerges slowly. He stops often, not out of caution, but out of care. Walnut demands to be carved with intention. It reveals its character only under hands that respect its boundaries. He sets down his gouge and flexes his fingers. They ache today faintly but persistently. He ignores the stiffness as he always does and turns to his smallest rasp, smoothing the inside of the bowl. He works through midday, pausing only to sip broth from a chipped ceramic cup and stretch his back near the fire. The coals crackle softly as he warms his hands, staring absently into the flames. You catch a glance at his reflection in the window. Older now, lines along the mouth at the corners of the eyes, but still upright, still steady. Still the carving. He returns to the spoon and begins forming the handle. This one he decides to leave a nod to the strength of the wood. No curves or fanciful details. Just clean, solid design. Once the form is complete, he reaches for the sandpaper, beginning with a coarse sheet before moving to finer grains. The walnut darkens under the friction, the grain revealing itself in rich patterns like smoke frozen in wood. Then comes the oil. Not linseed this time, but walnut oil, lighter in smell, subtler in sheen. He applies it slowly, watching the wood drink it in. The spoon gleams faintly in the late afternoon light, its dark surface glowing with quiet pride. And smiles. Not because it's perfect, but because it's done with care, with presence, with a kind of honesty that doesn't need explaining. Outside, the bells ring again, marking another hour past. Another day winding on. And inside, one more spoon is born. And in that small act, humble, nearly invisible, the world turns just a little softer. The city awakes under a muted sky, the kind of soft gray that makes everything feel gentler. Rain lingers in the corners of rooftops, gathering into slow-dripping beads that fall to the street like shy punctuation marks. The canals have gone a little stiller, the water darker and glassier than usual. Harlem, for all its golden age bustle, knows how to pause when the clouds decide to settle in. It's inside the workshop. The rain taps gently on the windows, creating a rhythm that weaves through the silence like a lullaby played on stone and glass. Stands at the shelf near the hearth, deciding on today's companion. His hand hovers for a moment, then settles on a length of hornbeam, pale, dense, and tough as a stubborn ox. Most avoid it. It dulls blades quickly and splinters if rushed, but isn't one for rushing. He doesn't fear woods that fight back. Here's your historical anchor. Hornbeam, known as ironwood by many, was rarely chosen for ornamental work. Its unyielding nature made it more common in gear wheels, farm tools, and yokes. But in the hands of a skilled carver with patience and a very sharp blade, hornbeam spoons lasted decades, even generations. And today's curious detail. In some parts of the Netherlands, hornbeam was thought to absorb ill fortune. Spoons made from it were used by or traveling healers passed from patient to patient. Some even believed they could stir out illness, though historians are still very skeptical about that claim, particularly given that hornbeam was also used for shoe soles. Healing and walking, a useful duality perhaps. He places the hornbeam block on the bench and sharpens his tools meticulously. Long, slow arcs across the whetstone. The usual sound of steel against stone is sharper this time, the blade needing more edge to face what's ahead. He begins with a strong gouge, removing thick curls of wood with heavy, deliberate strokes. The hornbeam doesn't yield easily, it pushes back, splinters when approached with overconfidence. But has none of that, he waits, adjusts. Lets the wood guide the angle, the depth, the speed. Each cut is like a question, each resistance an answer. You watch as the spoon's bowl takes shape, slightly deeper than usual. Maybe for broth, maybe for someone who eats slowly, savoring each bite. There's an honesty in its form, unadorned, practical, beautiful in its restraint. The light in the room shifts as the clouds break briefly, casting a soft glow over the workshop. The hornbeam seems to glow with it, subtle, like the grain is keeping its secrets close. Switches tools, smaller gouges now, carving finer lines, working the handle into a slightly squared architectural form. It's unusual for him, this kind of angular shape. But it suits the wood. Hornbeam demands clarity, not flourish. He pauses to drink water from a pewter cup, the condensation cool on his fingers. Then back to work, sanding with slow, tight circles, smoothing each edge until the spoon feels more like stone polished by centuries of wind. A knock at the door interrupts the hush. A neighbor, bundled against the rain, holds a cracked ladle. She asks quietly if might repair it, or if it's too far gone, make another. He takes it gently, turning it in his hands, assessing the damage. He nods, says he'll do what he can. No promises, but then promises aren't really how he speaks. She thanks him, leaves a small cloth-wrapped bundle in exchange. Dried apples, you think, and maybe a heel of hard cheese. Sets the ladle aside and returns to the hornbeam. The spoon is nearly ready for oil now. He holds it up to the window, watching the pale, tight grain catch the gray light like frost on glass. And then oil. The cloth glides over the surface slowly, drawing the spoon's quiet beauty to the surface. It doesn't shine like cherry or walnut. It glows faintly, like something hiding warmth under its skin. He places it on the drying rack and exhales. Not a sigh, not quite. Just breath leaving slowly, like it, too, needed the space. And outside, the rain begins again, steadier this time, tapping a lullaby onto the roof while another quiet day folds itself into memory. The late afternoon settles over Harlem like a silk shawl pulled across the shoulders of a well-worn chair. The rain has stopped, but the air still carries its hush. Puddles gather along cobblestones, mirroring a sky that looks more like pewter than blue. The trees outside's window shimmer faintly, leaves glistening like polished metal. Inside, the workshop is warm again. The hearth glows, embers humming low with life. The spoons on the drying rack cast long shadows as the light lines in. There's a smell of oiled wood, beeswax, and something herbal, perhaps lavender or thyme, forgotten somewhere near the sill. Now today chooses a rare indulgence. He unwraps it carefully, a gift perhaps from a trader he once repaired furniture for. The wood is dark golden, veined with streaks of brown and green. It's warm to the touch, dense but forgiving. A historical moment, was extremely rare in the Dutch Republic, imported only in small quantities from southern Europe. It was considered exotic not just for its look but for the mythology that clung to it. Greeks, Romans, and later the Church all claimed it as sacred. In 17th century Dutch circles it was sometimes called pilgrim's wood as it was favored for small devotional objects or rosary beads. Strange but true, some believed spoons imparted wisdom to their users. The superstition goes that a child who grew up using a spoon would speak early and well, possibly even grow into a preacher or a poet. Whether believes that or not, he treats this wood with reverence. He begins slowly, shaping the bowl first, using his finest gouge, pausing often between strokes. The curls are rich, buttery, aromatic. They fall to the floor like golden threads. The spoon he's making is unlike the others. Not just rare, but softer in intent. The handle is slender, gently twisted, not ornate but artistic, echoing the natural turn of a tree branch reaching toward sun. As he works, his mind wanders back to a letter he received last month from a cousin in Leiden. A school teacher now, married, children on the way. She asked for a set of spoons for her new kitchen. Nothing too pretty, she wrote, just something that will last. He hadn't written back yet, but perhaps this spoon, this prayer of a thing might go in that parcel. He stops carving and runs his fingers along the inside of the bowl, checking for texture. Smooth, balanced, ready for sanding. The sunlight has dimmed now, more shadow than gold. Lights another candle, its small flame dancing in the draft. He begins sanding with a piece of linen-wrapped pumice, polishing the wood until it gleams like amber. The oiling comes next, a mixture of walnut and lemon oil, rubbed gently in slow, patient strokes. The grain deepens immediately, turning golden brown, the darker streaks rising like ink in water. When finished, holds the spoon a little longer than usual. It rests in his hands like something alive. He places it gently on a cloth by the window, apart from the others. This one perhaps needs to sit with the sky for a while. He tidies the bench slowly, placing tools back in their spots, brushing away the shavings into a small pile near the hearth. A finch outside chirps once, then flutters away as if approving. As twilight folds into evening, pours a cup of broth and settles into the chair near the fire. He sips slowly, the spoonless meal reminding him that sometimes hands deserve to rest. And you too feel the weightless grace of this day, the slow reverence, the quiet pride in a task that required nothing more than attention, time, and care. The world outside continues to turn. But here, inside this small, quiet space, something eternal has taken root. One more spoon, one more story, one more moment of peace. Though the air smells of frost, not winter yet, but something like it, early morning crisp and dry, with a thin fog hugging the edges of the rooftops. Harlem is unusually quiet today. Even the canal seems to be holding its breath, its surface still and reflective like a mirror covered in breaths. Lights a small fire in the hearth. He does so not out of cold, it hasn't crept in fully yet, but for company. The crackling wood, the orange glow, the scent of burning pine. It's like a quiet conversation he doesn't need to answer aloud. Today he selects a block of linden wood, also known as basswood. It's unassuming, a bit plain and light both in color and in heft. But it's a carver's dream, pliable, soft, and gracious to even the clumsiest of hands. Not that is clumsy. Here's your historical note for the hour. Linden wood was one of the most commonly used materials in European carving, not just for spoons, but for devotional statues, altarpieces, and children's toys. It held detail well without being brittle, making it a favorite for both apprentices and masters. And here's your curious, perhaps slightly odd cultural tidbit. In some villages along the North Sea coast, linden spoons were burned after weddings. The idea was that the newlyweds no longer needed separate utensils, they now shared everything, including one metaphorical mouth. Superstitious, perhaps. Romantic, debatable. Hygienic, absolutely not. Has no intention of burning this spoon. In fact, today feels like a day to create something deliberately unremarkable. Something meant to be used daily, perhaps dropped into soup, forgotten in a basket, chewed on by a toddler, stained by berries. Not an heirloom, just a companion. He begins carving, and you can sense something different about his pace. It's slower, yes, but with less of the usual precision. He's letting the wood lead today. He takes longer breaks between strokes. He leans back in his chair. He even closes his eyes now and again, listening not to the knife but to the silence beyond it. Because something else is on his mind. On the shelf beside him sits a folded piece of parchment. It arrived the day before. The seal broken, the message brief. A friend has passed, a fellow carver from a nearby village. They hadn't spoken in years. But once long ago they carved together at the same bench in Leiden. Shared tools, shared jokes, shared silence. The kind of friendship that never becomes loud, but settles into the corners of one's life like dust in a favorite book. Glances at the parchment again, then returns to his work. The spoon is nearly shaped now. Its bowl is broad and a little shallow. The handle is square at the end, slightly thicker than his usual. It's not refined, not elegant, but there's something deeply kind about it. A spoon made not to impress but to serve, maybe even to be forgotten, or maybe not. He sands the surface gently, thinking not of perfection but of comfort. How it will feel in someone's hand when they're tired. How it will rest in a bowl beside crusts of bread, waiting for the next meal. He oils it with a modest walnut blend and sets it on the drying rack, not in the front, not on display. Near the back, quietly. You realize something then. This spoon, this small gesture, is not meant to be seen. It's meant to continue something, to echo a rhythm, to keep a pulse going, a way to say, I'm still here, we mattered. And perhaps that's what all slow work is, memory you can hold. As outside, the morning brightens, though the sky remains gray. Life goes on, and so does the craft. One more spoon, one more goodbye folded into wood. The sky burns gold in the late afternoon, one of those rare days when Harlem seems to be made of light. Every window glows, every rooftop catches fire, and even the canals shimmer as if they've swallowed the sun. The market down the street is alive. You hear it distantly through the shutters. The clatter of carts, the rhythmic bark of vendors, the laughter of children weaving between baskets of cabbage and stacks of dried fish. But does not go to the market. He is polishing spoons. Not new ones, no carving today. Just cloth and wax, a small pot of oil, and a careful inspection of every finished piece in his collection. He lines them up on the table. Some he made weeks ago, others months, a few years. Each one carries a weight, though none are heavy. Each one holds a story, though none speak. He lifts them one by one, turning them in the light. So with a knot in the middle of the handle, he remembers dropping it on the floor, swearing softly, sanding the dent until it became a decorative flourish. A sycamore with a wide bowl, perfect for lentils. He remembers carving it during a storm, the windows rattling like they were about to take flight. A black walnut that had cracked slightly during oiling. He kept it anyway. It had earned its imperfections. Here's your historical fact. In the 17th century, spoons were considered personal property, often carried from place to place. Travelers, workers, and students alike would carry their own strapped to belts or tucked into pouches. Owning your own spoon wasn't just practical, it was a tiny declaration of self. And here's an almost too adorable cultural tidbit. In some towns, people carved initials into their spoons not to mark ownership, but to send messages. A heart for affection, a triangle for good luck, an acorn for a wish that someone might grow into themselves. These were called silent prayers, conversations in wood. Picks up a linden spoon and traces a small, nearly invisible mark on the handle. A tiny wave, barely the size of a thumbnail. You hadn't noticed it before. He holds it a little longer than the others. Smiles barely. Then he begins oiling, starting with the walnut. His movements are smooth, slow, deliberate. The cloth moves in circles, buffing the surface until it catches the fatting light just right. This is not work for him, this is ritual. This is remembering. Each spoon, as he finishes polishing it, is placed back into a box lined with linen. Some he wraps individually. Others he stacks gently, separating them with soft cloths. A few are placed in a smaller chest, one you haven't seen before. Its hinges creak softly when he opens it. And inside are 3 spoons, each different wood, each different shape. He adds a 4th, today's linden. Closes the chest and locks it. There's no ceremony, no explanation, just the quiet understanding that some things are kept, not to be used, not to be shown, just to stay. As outside, the market begins to quiet. The sun lowers, turning the buildings a deeper orange, casting long shadows across cobblestones. The smell of roasting chestnuts drifts in from a vendor below. He returns to his bench and pours a small glass of warmed wine. He doesn't drink often, but today there's cause. Not celebration exactly, just acknowledgement. Another season is closing, another box is filled. He sits in the softening light, spoon in hand, fire flickering low behind him. And as night settles once again over the rooftops of Harlem, you feel the slow hum of this man's life, carved not from grand events, but from repetition, reverence, and the quiet dignity of creating things that last. Things meant to be held, passed, used, remembered. And in that slow, glowing moment, everything feels exactly enough. It's quiet again. That late autumn kind of quiet where everything feels wrapped in wool. The trees outside the workshop are mostly bare now, their branches holding onto the last few leaves like they're not quite ready to say goodbye. The wind carries them in slow, spiraling dances past the window. Inside, the fire is crackling low, and the spoons, old and new, watch from their wooden ranks on the rack. He is sitting at his bench, but not working. He's not carving, not sanding, just sitting. A block of wood in one hand, not yet chosen, not yet anything. He's been like this for some time now. You see, there are days even a spoon carver doesn't carve. Days when the world asks nothing of the hands but everything of the heart. And when that happens, the tools rest too. So today, it's not about what to make, it's about why. Now here's your historical fact. In 17th century Dutch guilds, artisans were occasionally encouraged to take a day of silence, not religious necessarily, but a professional reset. They didn't write, didn't speak, and certainly didn't produce. It was believed that skilled hands needed stillness to remain skillful. Some called it the pause of craft. And now, your curious cultural gem. In several rural Dutch towns, families would leave a carved spoon in a child's crib not for use but as a promise. It symbolized the tools of the future, the idea that one day that child would grow into someone who could shape the world around them. Some parents even whispered dreams into the spoon, like soft seeds waiting for soil. He rubs his thumb slowly across the uncut wood. He's not sad exactly. He's remembering. And memories are their own kind of work. His eyes drift toward a shelf high on the wall, one you may not have noticed before. It holds just 5 spoons, all different, none for sale. Is each one from a different decade. One from his apprenticeship, cracked and clumsy, the bowl lopsided like a tired smile. Another from the year his father passed, carved in near silence, its handle shaped like a branch, unfinished on purpose. One from the war years when wood was scarce and the city's laughter had gone quiet. Each one a chapter. He doesn't touch them, just looks. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly, he begins to hum. It's not a tune you know, it may not be one he knows either, but it loops softly in the space between breath and memory. It curls into the corners of the workshop and settles there where the dust lives. Eventually he moves, sets the wood aside, reaches instead for a spoon already made, a simple one, sycamore, plain, comfortable. He holds it like you'd hold a stone warmed by sun. Then he stands. And for the first time in what feels like days, leaves the workshop. Just for a moment. He walks down the narrow hall, past the coat rack with its one heavy cloak, past the shoes lined neatly by the door. He steps into the cold, fog-wrapped street and walks, spoon in hand, to a neighbor's house. She answers in slippers, her eyes surprised but soft. He doesn't say much, just offers the spoon. She takes it with both hands, and the silence between them is more than enough. You see, some gifts don't need explaining. Some days don't need productivity. And some lives don't need grandeur to matter. Returns to the workshop alone, but not empty. The fire has burned low, the shadows longer. He doesn't relight it. Just sits again, the scent of old wood and ember curling around him. And you feel it too, that ache of quiet, the fullness of restraint, the power of simply being. In this slow room, with its slower man, the world finally stops rushing. And in the stillness, the soul stretches out and breathes. The evening settles in like a well-folded blanket. The air outside is colder now, an honest cold, the kind that bites gently at your knuckles and makes your breath visible. Harlem's streets gleam faintly under a rising moon, their damp stones catching light in small, stubborn reflections. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell tolls 7 times, each ring deeper than the last. Inside's workshop, a candle flickers on the sill, casting long, quiet shadows on the wall. He's just returned from delivering the spoon to his neighbor, and his steps are heavier now but not weary. Grounded. He sets the kettle over the fire, rekindled just enough to warm the room and boil a little water. The flames rise slowly, like they, too, have taken the day to think. Tonight's work won't involve carving, not exactly. It instead reaches for a small, narrow box, its hinges brass worn smooth. He opens it with care. Inside, rows of old carving knives and gouges glint softly in the firelight. Now, they are not his tools. They belonged to his grandfather, each one marked with initials. AJ for a carver of boats, not spoons, whose calloused hands once shaped the prows of fishing vessels and the oars that carried them home. Now, here's your historical thread. In Dutch craft families of the 17th century, tools were often passed down like heirlooms, more important than wealth, more sacred than books. They carried the memory of hands, the shape of labor, and the quiet witness of years. And here's a strange little fact. Some families even named their tools. There's record of a gouge called Little Teeth, and a chisel referred to as Old Widow. Whether out of superstition or sentiment, these names stuck, and when tools were lost or broken, eulogies were sometimes spoken at the hearth. Lifts each blade, inspects it, runs a cloth along the length. not to use them, just to remember their balance, the weight of lineage, the soft click of continuity. He oils them carefully, one by one, then places them back into their velvet-lined resting place. Then something rare. He opens the small drawer under his bench and retrieves a spoon that looks different. It's decorative, unusually so. The bowl is narrow, more like a leaf than a scoop. The handle twists into a gentle spiral ending in a carved tulip. It's beautiful, but clearly never meant to stir soup. He holds it for a long while, then sets it on the table beside the candle and begins writing. You haven't seen him write often, but tonight the ink flows easily. The letter is short, maybe 10 lines. You can't read it from here, but his hand pauses at the name, and you notice the corner of his mouth tug upward slightly. Fondness lives there, maybe even a little pride. When the ink is dry, he wraps the spoon in linen, folds the letter, and places both in a wooden box with a wax seal ready to press. You realize now, this one is for someone who will never see this workshop. Someone younger, somewhere far. And that's the thing about slowness. It doesn't just cradle the present, it shelters the future. It says, I was here, I touched this, I shaped this with care. Seals the box, then sets it beside the door. He blows out the candles. Lets the fire settle into embers, and sits for a while longer in the gentle hush of his craft. The spoons on the rack gleam faintly in the moonlight, their shadows long and curved. Each one a small testimony. Each one a slow chapter. Each one waiting for the hand it was meant to find. And in this quiet, quiet room, as the city curls into sleep and time forgets to hurry, you feel it. The profound softness of a life well carved. Though the wind has changed, you feel it before you hear it. A shift in the air, a kind of whisper running through the narrow streets of Harlem. It flutters the laundry on the line. It skims across the canal like fingers brushing a mirror. It nudges closed a shutter that had been just barely open. Autumn is slipping toward winter. The days are shorter now, the light more fragile. And inside the little workshop near the edge of town is rearranging spoons. Not dramatically, just moving them from one drawer to another, from shelf to crate, from present to past. Some are being packed, others polished, and a small, select few are simply held for a moment or two longer than necessary before being set aside with care. Though this isn't cleaning, though this is curation. Here's your historical note for the hour. Toward the end of their working years, Dutch artisans were known to create what were called rest chests, wooden boxes filled not with tools but with examples of their best work. These weren't for sale. They weren't even meant to be displayed. They were for remembering, a quiet museum for one. And here's your obscure cultural tidbit. In some towns, these chests were buried with the artisan or passed to the next in line. But in Harlem, there was a peculiar custom. Once a year, a chosen family member would open the chest and use one item inside. Just once. Just to keep the memory warm. Lifts a ladle from the rack. It's worn around the edges, slightly uneven, but graceful in the way a pebble becomes smooth from time and tide. He turns it in his hands, traces the grain like a map he once knew by heart. Then he wraps it in cloth, places it into the oak chest he's been quietly filling for the last several weeks. You hadn't noticed until now, but the chest is nearly full. Each piece rests snugly inside its linen sleeve. Each one placed with the soft precision of a man who knows that how you say goodbye matters. He doesn't rush. He stops often, letting his fingers brush the tools, the spoons, the corners of the chest. He lights a candle not because it's dark, but because the room deserves the glow. And then a sound. The faint but unmistakable footsteps on the cobblestones outside, slow, measured. There's a knock on the door, 2 soft taps. Opens it and finds a young boy, perhaps 8 or 9. Freckles, eager eyes, a wool scarf nearly swallowing his chin. He is holding something wrapped in paper. A gift no too uncertain in his grip, a request. He holds it out wordlessly, accepts it. Unwraps it. Inside is a spoon. Roughly carved, uneven, splintered in places, clearly the work of a beginner, and yet something about it holds. Ty turns it slowly in his hands and for a long moment says nothing. Then he looks at the boy and smiles. It's the smallest smile, but it holds worlds. He gestures for the child to come inside. No instruction is given, no lecture, just 2 people, a bench, a block of wood, and time. And there it is. A legacy not written, not spoken, just passed like a spoon hand to hand. The boy's eyes follow every movement, the sharpening, the angle, the way wipes the blade after each pass like it's being thanked. They don't speak, they don't need to. The sun dips lower, casting long gold shadows across the floorboards. The fire crackles. The boy breathes slower now, shoulders relaxing. Carves a soft curve into a scrap of maple, then hands it to the boy. The boy tries to copy the motion, fails, tries again. The 3rd time it works. Nods satisfied. Not because it's perfect, all because it's beginning. The moon is high. The streets are hushed. Even the night animals, cats, owls, whatever secret creatures inhabit alleyways seem to be tiptoeing through their routines. The frost is stronger now. It paints the windows in silver lace, curling at the edges like shy wallpaper. And inside the workshop, the fire is low but steady. The smell of cedar and something faintly citrusy lingers in the air. It is finishing the boxes. Not a spoon this time. A small keepsake box, square, plain, dovetailed joints along the corners. It's made of applewood, a mellow, sweet-smelling timber that ages into a warm honey hue. The box is empty. But it won't stay that way. Here's your historical morsel. Applewood, though more commonly used for tool handles and pipes, was occasionally used for keepsake boxes, especially among rural artisans who had access to pruned limbs. Unlike oak or walnut, it didn't impress with grandeur. It charmed with scent, with softness, with surprise durability. And now, the odd but true cultural detail. There are accounts, mostly from small towns in Friesland, of people carving applewood boxes and placing a lock of hair, a bit of dried flour, or even a single wooden spoon inside. These were called soul boxes, and they were hidden in walls or cellars with the idea that they'd watch over the house like a quiet guardian. He doesn't believe in magic, but he does believe in attention, and that's its own kind of spell. He sands the lid until it fits like a whisper, then polishes the wood until it glows under his fingertips. No design, no flourish, just craftsmanship. He places one spoon inside, just one. A walnut spoon with a soft curve and a tulip handle, you remember it. He carved it 2 weeks ago. It sat on the windowsill for a long time. Then a note folded once, tucked in beside it. He closes the lid, breathes deeply, and then does something you've never seen him do. He removes his apron. It's not a dramatic gesture. There's no finality in it, just a quiet that something is finished. He folds it, places it on the stool, and walks to the window. From here, he watches Harlem, the rooftops like waves, the chimneys breathing faint trails into the night, the moon heavy and slow. His reflection blurs in the glass. And yet there is peace. Behind him, the room is tidy, the tools are oiled, the spoons are dry, the chest is full. Even the shavings on the floor seem settled, like snow that decided not to melt. He picks up the box, tucks it under his arm, and opens the door. Just a crack. The cold sneaks in, presses its face against the edge of the room, but doesn't flinch. He stands there a while, letting the air fill his lungs. Then steps outside. He leaves the door open for a moment longer, as if letting the night say hello to the room. And then it closes gently. And inside, the candle flickers once. And the workshop, warm, wooden, wonderful, exhales. Though there is no sound in the workshop. The fire has gone out, leaving only a soft charcoal hush where flames once lived. A single candle burns in the far corner, its light swaying slowly, the wick curling inward like a dancer bowing after a very quiet song. The room feels full, though empty. It holds no one, and yet it holds everything. There's the smell of applewood oil, faint as memory. There's the faint warmth left on a stool. There's dust floating in the air, soft, slow, almost too lazy to land. The spoons are all in their places. The tools are aligned, sleeping in their drawers like old soldiers whose battles are stories now. The windows are closed, the shutters drawn. But the room still hums. It hums with rhythms, with patience, with years, with every cut ever made, every shape ever coaxed from stubborn wood, every visitor welcomed without fanfare, every gift handed off with a nod. Here's your final historical truth. In 17th century Harlem, there were no monuments for spoon carvers. No plaques, no parades, no grand citations. But every household had their work. Every meal was touched by their hands. Every child learned to stir, to serve, to share, because of a wooden thing shaped slowly, carefully by someone like. And your final cultural gem. Some believed that a spoon, when kept long enough, took on the spirit of its user. It remembered, it listened. And if passed down kindly, it whispered its history through the grain. So the light from the candle flickers again, lower now. Though the night is colder, but not unkind. As if you listen closely, you can almost hear it, that soft wooden echo. Not a word, not a note, just the quiet rhythm of a life carved in peace. Though the wind nudges the shutters, but they do not open. Though they have closed gently. And so has the day. Now you're still. You feel it, don't you? That settling, that uncoiling, that slow release of thought, like a hand letting go of a ribbon in water. Your breath is softer now, quieter. Like wood being polished, small circles, gentle pressure, no rush. Let everything around you dissolve. Let the workshop drift back into the folds of sleep. Let return to his slow silence. Let the moon ease itself deeper into the sky. You're no longer walking the cobblestones. You're floating above them, a ghost of a breeze, a memory of pine. And beneath that, you begin to notice something even slower. The rhythm of your own heart. Unrushed, unbothered, unfolding like a warm linen in a morning sun. Whatever you carried into tonight, you can set it down now, like the tools laid to rest, like the spoon placed gently into a box, like a name whispered once and then trusted to time. Let the stories rest and let the noise outside blur and soften. Let your body sink, first your shoulders, then your ribs, then the weight behind your eyes. Let the lids grow heavier, not like doors closing, but like petals folding in for the night. In this stillness, there is no need to do anything. No need to fix. No need to finish. You are not a task. You are not a thing to be carved or sanded. You are already the spoon. A whole is simple enough. Carried gently through the quiet, in hands that know how to hold without hurryings. And now sleep comes, not like a storm, but like an ember sighing into ash. The soft, the safe, the timeless, the good night. And from all of us at Whispers of History, thank you for spending this slow hour with us. We'll be right here whenever you return. Now rest, and dream slow.